And good evening. I'm Jonathan Higgins.
And I'm Rich Carlson.
And we are the Scanner Guys, and we're live on this Wednesday night. Nothing too fluffy about it whatsoever.
No. This has been a great day. The weather's starting to cool down a little bit here, and we're getting ready for patio weather out here in Phoenix.
Patio weather. It's time to enjoy the patio weather. Yeah, because you're not going to get baked during the summer.
No, with my luck though, the first real nice day, I'll spend half the day sleeping on the couch.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And then the phone will ring, right?
Yeah. Then the phone. Oh, I've done that. I fell asleep at the desk the other day, and we had about 5 minutes for phone calls, and all of a sudden the phone rang. I'm like, okay, how long have I been?
Yeah. For my broadcast days, I fell asleep once working an overnight. And it was just the last song before, I was going to go live. And with automation, it stops down automatically.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening, it was Carly Simon song. I don't remember which one. And it was the last song before before I would go on. I nodded off. And I woke up startled. I didn't hear anything. I didn't look at the clock. So I potted up the mic and I backselled all the songs, did the weather. And then I realized that I was out for a good 15 minutes. So I basically backselled songs that aired 15 minutes ago. So it was a lot of dead air. And then the station, I'm not going to reveal what it is, but we had a 9 in a row. So in order for me to get this was at the 10 minutes after was my first break. And then there was another one at about 50. So they would run 9 in a row, which would sweep the bottom of the hour. So I was thinking, no 9 in a row is going to happen now. We're going to trim out those songs in the middle. So the program director won't realize that I fell asleep.
Well, that's the nice thing about working on overnights. And, I had a girlfriend of mine back in my college days who worked as a DJ at a radio station that had the power of a medium-sized light bulb. And she worked the overnight shift a couple times. And she'd tell me, you got to call me about once an hour to make sure I'm awake because I will fall asleep if I have to do 6 songs in a row.
Yeah. So the bad thing about working overnight.
Yeah.
So the other guy, I worked weekend overnight, and people didn't set their alarm clock typically to me.
Yeah.
But during the week, they set the alarm clock to the overnight guy, and he fell asleep. And guess what happens if you set your alarm clock to a radio station? It's dead air.
You sleep in.
You sleep in. And
Dale asks if you ever locked yourself out of the building.
Thankfully, no, I've never done that. That would have been bad. I never locked myself out of the building. I did flood the bathroom.
We don't need to hear the whole story on that.
I'll tell it. Hold on. So I went to the ladies' room was the closest to the on-air studio. And it had the floor. It was an older building, so the floor would drop down a little bit. So it was the floor for whatever reason was lower than the regular floor in the hallway.
Yeah.
So I went in there, did a quick visit. It wasn't the extended stay. So I went to go flush, and of course, my products went down. My liquid went down the toilet. And then all of a sudden, the water was coming in to fill it, kept going and going and going. So mind you, it flooded the floor. So literally I had a plastic cup, one of those Dixie cups, and I was scooping the water back into the toilet. And then I had to mop it up. Mind you, this was at the end of my shift. This was when the overnight guy during the week was taking over. I was running producer on a show that they ran during a Sunday night. And he goes on, he's busting a gut, because I told him I flooded the ladies' room. And of course, this was Sunday night. So Monday morning, everybody in the office is going to be there. So I had to clean this up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's talk scanners.
Yeah.
So anyway,
hurry up. Finish the story and let's go.
So I ended up cleaning it all up. And then he goes on the air and says, the radio station, and said, "Oh, everything's flowing here. Like, great tonight." Of course it was. Those are the two crazy things that have happened to me on air. So let's take a look at tonight's. Oops, I don't want to remove it. Let's take a look at tonight's topic. I almost removed it. Ooh,
we do have a topic, guys. Yes, we do.
Yep. So let me just see here. Get this on this screen. Classic scanners.
Cool.
So classic scanners. We're going to talk about them tonight. So there's some that are going to be a lot of you probably have had. So we're going to take a look at that. We want to thank Rig Picks and Radio Picks for some of these photos. And some of these are actually directly from Uniden. Believe it or not, there is a photo archive that Uniden has. And believe it or not, it has some of the old scanners in it. So we've got some high quality photos for some of those Uniden ones. So let's take a look here. So this is Rich's first scanner. Look at that. It even comes with a frequency list. Look at this.
Yeah. So this was the very first scanner I got as a kid. And I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old, something like that. So this would have been the latter part of the 1960s, maybe 1970-ish. And this was a TMR 8H scanner. It was an 8-channel VHF only. Maybe I was 13. Maybe it was in the early 70s. I don't remember exact time frame, but I think I was in junior high school. And those were the 8 channels that were in that scanner. My dad bought it for me. It was used, and he bought it from a friend of his. And these were the frequencies that were used in my house. And I remembered that channel plan because that was the scanner and the channels that I had for 10 years. And yeah, the picture is a little blurry. We get that. That's the quality of the picture. Unfortunately, I no longer have the scanner. That was, 40 years ago. But that was the best picture I could find that we could use.
Yeah.
So that was one I had.
I thought the video was blurry. It's the picture. Yeah. So looking at it, you had an 8-channel scanner there, and you had all 8 channels with something programmed.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And we had a store. Well, of course, we had the local Radio Shack store, which everybody had a local Radio Shack store. But we also had a electronics store in town that I would ride my bike to and occasionally buy a crystal or something like that if one of these crystals went bad. But they were fantastic scanners. And if you take a look at the power cord on the left side of the picture, on the end that goes in the radio, it was a 4-pin connector, and it had 2 pins vertical and 2 pins horizontal. And I don't remember exactly. 2 of them were for the DC power for 12 volts, and 2 of them for AC power, 110 volts with the power cord. And I only had one of those ends. And when I got my driver's license a few years later, I wanted to put that in a car. I had to solder the black and red wires to that one plug because I didn't have another plug and I couldn't get one, so I could put it in the car.
But you ended up getting it in the car, which was good.
I did.
So mission accomplished there.
Yep. So that was the first one. This was my first handheld scanner. This was the Midland. We just call it the 4-channel crystal scanner. It had a little door on the side to put the 4 crystals in. And by this time, I was a cadet and then later a firefighter in Buffalo Grove. So I had, of course, those channels in there. It was our fire channel, the local mutual aid channel, our public works car-to-car police channel in there, and then the neighboring fire department, which was the town I actually lived in. So that's the one I carried with me on my belt when I worked at the hardware store or worked at the restaurant until they gave me a Minotaur pager.
And that looks, and I was just going to say, it's a little tall, but it looks just like a pager, the way, the style of it, just, it's got that really nice black case, and then it's got, all your dials and knobs at the top, just like one of those pagers.
Yeah, and it worked really well. It was relatively compact and thin, and it did the job. It worked. It received very well, and it worked great, and I had that for several years.
All right, let's take a look here. These are the things that we hear about all the time. I remember when I first started working at Scanner Master, I would get the calls from a lot of the old timers, because they could tell that I was younger, and then they would always go into story time with me, when I'm trying to help them, or they're in the process of purchasing a scanner back in 2008 when I first started Scanner Master. I remember the day when you had to get crystals, and then and then I would get the story. That's when scanners were simple with crystals. Now you got this computer programming. Now I got to have a computer, and now we're at this point now where we're at 2020, and that's basically most of these scanners you program it by a computer at this point. And
absolutely
the transitioning of it, was then, a lot of scanners were basically computer based, and there was a lot of people saying, I remember when scanners were simple, and these are the crystals here. And I remember referring them to the various companies that still sold crystals.
Yeah.
I got familiar with that relatively quickly because they would be calling us on the phone and saying, I need crystals for XYZ scanner. Then I'm like,
I keep a little cheat sheet with phone numbers of places that we refer to.
Yeah, and that's what I was doing too. Way back when, there was a couple of different websites, and I would refer them over to them. And just to think of it, these prices that you put on the screen, Rich, $5 to $10 in the 1970s was a lot of money.
Oh yeah, that's like $30 these days, and that was for each channel. And I at one time had a 20-channel scanner in the car and a 16-channel one at the house. And now you've got 36 crystals, and you're spending $400 just to put crystals in the darn thing.
Well, you know what it's like in this day and age? Mm-hmm. It's computer printers.
Yeah.
You spend so much on the printer, and then you spend an arm and a leg replacing the ink.
Yeah.
So
they give you a little starter package of ink that lasts for about 10 pages. And then, you spend $100 on the printer, then you're going to spend $300 every 6 months to put toner in the darn thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could see here on some of these, it shows one is 160.56 if I'm reading that right upside down. And and then there's one here that's 160.175, and then you get a low band. I mean, there's a wide variety of it, and this could get very, very cost. Could you imagine this day and age with all the frequency changes if we had to buy crystals every time?
Well, back in the day, I had a lot of crystal scanners and a lot of crystals, and I had a lot of crystals that didn't have a home at the time. And so what I did is I found a little plastic box, I don't know, someplace. I don't remember where I found it, probably a Walgreens or a Kmart or something like that. And I cut a piece of styrofoam, just the right size to fit in that box. And I would take the crystals and stick it in that styrofoam and then cover the top. So that way the crystals were protected from rattling around. And, so that I could go in there and find the right crystal if I already had it. And the problem is Regency scanners and Radio Shack scanners and Bearcat scanners all had specific crystal formulas. So Regency and Radio Shack scanners back in the day normally worked, with the same set of crystals, but Uniden scanners had a different calculation. And so a Uniden scanner wouldn't work in a Regency. Well, it would actually work, but it wouldn't give you the right frequency. So if you had 42.14 in a Regency, that same crystal, you put that into a Bearcat, and it might be 42.152 or 155 or something like that. May or may not be useful for anything.
But yeah, I mean, that's crazy too, because, you couldn't cross over some of these crystals. Which kind of, which was kind of smart of those companies, because, you're not able to take your XYZ brand scanner and move it over to the other one.
And that's why most of the time I kept Regency scanners in the crystal days, and I pretty much stayed away from Bearcats. The only Bearcats I had were the ones my uncle gave me, and I stayed Regency just because I could swap the crystals around.
Yeah, I could see how, and like you posted on here, $5 to $10 back in the '70s was a lot more money back then, and
Yeah.
especially like you said, you've got an 8 channel scanner, that could get very costly. I mean, let's say that each crystal was $10, that's $80.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
that's
I
probably close to what you paid for the scanner.
yeah,
Yeah. And Bill said the Regency had third overtone logic. Yeah. There was a formula that you could figure out what the actual crystal resonant frequency was. And so you take a look at that frequency, 153.815 there on the upper right. The frequency didn't vibrate at that frequency, or this crystal didn't vibrate at that frequency. It vibrated at 47.94. And then you multiplied it by 3 and then added 10.7, and then stood on your left foot and hopped up 3 times. And that's how the frequency thing was, the actual frequency of the crystal was derived. You had to figure out what the IF frequency and what the overtone was so that you could figure out the actual frequency. So the crystal manufacturers would tell you, okay, this is a ECS2 or a RXD2 or an MCS1 crystal, and Regencies used MCS2s and Bearcats used MCS1 or vice versa, I don't remember. And you bought that type of crystal with this frequency, and the actual crystal frequency was something totally different. And you had to be a mathematician to figure it out.
yeah. That is something when it comes to crystals.
Oh, yeah.
And look at this beauty right here. This we had several different versions of this scanner in the the National Scanner Museum, which is now no longer. And this was your first program. This must have been a blessing for you, going from crystals to actually be able to punch in a frequency and store it. 20 channels. I mean, who would have thought, this would have been big. At that point, you went from, we notice a pattern here. So your portable was 4 channels. Your desktop, your base mobile was 8.
Yeah.
And now you've made a big jump to 20. And it's programmable.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I had a 20-channel crystal scanner at the time, the Regency ACT20. But this, a buddy of mine had a Bearcat 210, and he let me borrow it when he went on vacation, and I played with it at work and stuff like that. And this is the first one that I actually bought, and I remember I paid $220 for it, which at that time was a fortune. Now, this is back when I'm making $13,000 a year working full time, and I'm paying $220 for a scanner, which is probably close to $1,000 these days. And I'm making not nearly the kind of money that I would make later in my life. But this was the first programmable one that I bought, and I had a early 80s Ford Bronco 2, which was the Ford Ranger pickup truck with the Bronco, with the SUV type thing on it. And there was a weird little shelf above the glove box, kind of an indentation. Mm-hmm. And this fit perfectly in there. I drilled 2 holes in the back, one for the power wire and one for the antenna lead. And it fit in there perfectly. It was ideal for that. But this was a great scanner. Worked great on low band. The one I bought was at Montgomery Ward. And if you take a look where it says Aircraft Marine Public Service underneath the keyboard, mm-hmm. on the Montgomery Ward's and the Sears versions of the scanner, it was labeled for that store name. And that was the only difference.
I see. And it's funny that the price was $220. Yeah. Now, it looks like that trend didn't stay the same with model numbers with Bearcat, because the STS 200, it would be a bargain at this point if it was $200, and the 100 would be $100.
Well, it's really weird because I also, very soon after this, I bought a Bearcat 250. And
what was that? Was that 250?
Yeah, and I paid $250 for it. So it kind of worked for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, but and the 250 was very similar, except it had 5 banks of 10 instead of 2 banks of 10. And these old scanners were actually they had some pretty decent features. They had a connector on the back that you could plug a recorder into. And remember the old cassette recorders that had the
voice, would be able to stop.
Yeah, well, it had the little on-off switch on the microphone that you could stop and start the record. Well, you could actually wire that into the back of the scanner and actually would switch the recorder on and off. So it worked out great for that.
Very cool. Let's continue on here with the presentation. This is your first. This is your first handheld programmable scanner. Now,
Yep.
This one has a few less channels, about 4 less channels than the other radio, 16 channels, VHF, UHF low, VHF high, and then also UHF. So,
Yep.
And this, this is, it's got the keypad on there. I mean, it looks like it's more the traditional size portable scanner.
Yeah. And this one was kind of neat because it had AA rechargeable batteries, but you needed a Phillips head screwdriver in order to change out the batteries. So you really weren't supposed to change the batteries out on this. And the one I had, and they had 2 versions of it. The older version, it's the one I had a threaded antenna connector. The one in the picture's got a BNC. And I remember when I took an Amtrak trip across the country, I brought this with me and I was able to do that. But I had to bring a little screwdriver in my kit with me in order to change the batteries because I didn't have a place to charge the batteries.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been definitely something that was key with this radio, just to be able to get the batteries out.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was a good scanner, and I had that for years, and it was my handheld scanner for a long time.
Dale's got a question for you right now. It's on the screen if you look at it.
Yes, yeah. So the plastic tube. So when you took the 2 screws out of the bottom of the radio, or was it 4 screws? I forget which. The batteries came out, and there was a little plastic tube that they went in. And I probably lost it at some point or another, but I did have that, and that kept the batteries lined up. Otherwise, they could jiggle around in there. And they may have made a version of this a little bit later on that allowed you to change the batteries, but had a twist off bottom. I don't recall for sure, but again, this was a great scanner, and it was relatively revolutionary at the time because it was the first easily available programmable handheld scanner around. I mean, there may have been other programmable handhelds before that, but this was the first one that you can get anywhere.
Let me just.
John's tired today.
It's just been busy as hell.
Yeah, I'll tell you that.
Let's take a look at here. So we've got a realistic, so that would have been a part of your Radio Shack. And then look,
Yep.
RCA, very much known for televisions and so on, was in the scanner business as well. So this was your first Radio Shack handheld portable scanner. Yet again, only 16 channels, covering the same bands pretty much. And then look at this, another crystal radio, which is RCA, 10 channel, built like a tank. I remember you talking about this before. And then the cool thing is the lights. I mean, these scanners had a lot of character back then, especially with the lights.
Yeah, this one had LEDs, which were relatively new at the time. And the older Regencies, like the one we showed a little while ago, actually had incandescent bulbs. And I remember they were number 47 bulbs because they'd burn out every once in a while. And and the local Walgreens had a flashlight bulb drawer. And you go in and I need a flashlight bulb for this. And they carried those light bulbs. And I would get one of those about once every 3 or 4 months and have to solder it in. On these LEDs, those things lasted forever. And that scanner, the one that I had, it probably still works, and somebody probably still has it. In fact, the guy that might have it is one of our watchers, my buddy Dan from many years back. He and I traded that scanner back and forth over the years, and you couldn't kill it. I mean, you could use it to chalk tires on a fire truck.
Wow. And it's certainly it looks like on the top there is where the opening was for the crystals, right? Where you can see that little silver. That's where you would open up the door and then change out the crystals.
Yeah. Yeah. You just open that and you pop the crystals in there. And it was a great receiver. And I used to listen to the low band skip with that. 33.7 for LA Fire Department. And this is from Chicago. And I used to listen to them all the time. It worked really good on that. I bought a lot of crystals for low band fire channels, which we didn't use in the Chicago area, just so I can listen to skip.
That's super cool. All right, we'll continue on. Let's see what we got next. So these are a lot of scanners that I've seen over the years, especially the one on the bottom. When I was working at the MBTA as media liaison in the subway operations, we had one of these scanners on the desk at the media liaison desk. And this was in the early 2000s. This is what they had for a scanner. It works pretty well. I've programmed it multiple times, for my stint at the T. And I've seen the top radio with, some of these radios that the keypad actually got worn out with that. And these had, look at the large channel capacities. We're finally up to 300 to 400 channels.
Yeah, the 2004 came with 300 channels, and you could add a diode inside the box, there was a diode matrix, and you either put in or cut a diode to make it do different things. You would cut one diode to enable cell coverage back in the day when you could still do that. You would add a specific diode to bump the capacity up to 400 channels. Another one changed it to a European version, which eliminated some frequencies or it changed the channel spacing on certain ones. And on my first 2004, there were two versions. There was one that had the cellular block from 870 to 890, and then the newer version had a cellular block from 869 to 894. Very subtle difference, but when they expanded the cellular band, they expanded the cellular block. I actually blew it up, figuring out what all the diodes did on that diode matrix on that thing. And I had to send it back to Radio Shack to get fixed. And they sent it back after they fixed it. And this time they spot welded the cage around the diode matrix on there to keep you from getting in there. But this was right during the transition from the old Radio Shack metal cased scanners. And it was one of the last ones. And then the new ones came with the plastic cases. And this was still the old style. It was big, huge. It worked great. I still have one out in my garage. I should have brought it in for the show, but I forgot.
Yeah, I dealt with the bottom one, at the MBTA. It worked pretty good. We were inside a multi-story dwelling, 45 High Street in Boston, if anybody's familiar with that. And that's where it's not too far away from the South Station. And I forgot what floor I was on. I was in the subway ops, and we had one of these, and I'd monitor the commuter rail on the south side because I was right next to South Station. It was the reception wasn't that great for the north side, but I was able to monitor that. I was able to monitor subway ops. I've heard all types of. There was a funny story. I listened to subway ops, and they were literally right next to me. And then I did have a portable radio, that was programmed for the subway ops and so on. And thankfully, I didn't have the transmits turned off. There was a couple of occasions where their radio systems went down at the T. And I left the transmits off in this radio. So I said, here you go, red line. I gave the red line dispatcher the portable radio because the red line radios would, his console was down. And the OCC manager comes waltzing down the stairs. And the guy said to the manager, he said, the radios are down and I'm using a citizen's radio to communicate with the trades. And then there was one other time they were pranksters with each other, the dispatchers. So what ended up happening at the T, you would work your way up. You would work as a track walker, a motorman, and so on. And then you would work your way to basically being in that room. So it wasn't like a job that was, you were handed that job. It was basically a job that you had to work your way up to. So one day, one of the dispatchers says, hand me their radio. So he was a bit of a jokester. And then the other guy was on the blue line. He was very serious on the radio and everything. So he kept coming over the radio. He would just blah, 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 radio check. Like he would say it really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd hear the foot pedal go down loud and clear. And then he would do it a minute later over the radio. Then you would hear and then he did it like 4 times on him. And then by the 4th time, you heard that foot pedal, metal on metal, bang it loud and clear. And then you could hear him laughing. And he said, what the hell are you doing? This is recorded. Oh, my God. It was good times with those guys. And I really enjoyed the job. But, yeah, that scanner brings back a lot of memories for me, being over at the T.
And then when the 2005 came out a couple years later, it was very similar, except it had 400 channels built in. And it was in a plastic case, and it had a little bit faster scan speed. And you could actually speed up that scan speed a little bit by cutting one of those other diodes. And they made it real easy. You just took the top case off, and the diodes were behind the display board, and there was a little metal cutout, and you just clip the right diode and to enable the cellular and to speed up the scan speed a little bit. And then a couple years later, they came out with the 2006, which just had some minor incremental updates to it. But these were awesome radios. I had a bunch of them, and I was so jealous. I had a buddy of mine who lived up in Wisconsin who had like 8 or 9 of the 2004s at his house, and all hooked up to a different antenna. So he had a big low band antenna that he used. He had a high band. He had a UHF. He had an 800. He had a military aircraft antenna and an aviation aircraft and civil aviation aircraft antenna. And I mean, it was all those antennas and one radio on each antenna, which that's probably why I've got so many radios here.
Yeah,
Wish I had as many antennas as he did.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about having multiple radios, once you figure out which band they're most sensitive to, and then if you're able to put on the actual frequency band antenna that's dedicated to that, you've got a win-win right through. But
absolutely.
Radios, I mean, you've got to admit these radios were, really good of its time.
Yeah.
And all the things that Bill Cheek was able to figure out. I mean, you imagine you blew up your radio. What do you think he did to his? Figure out what each thing would do.
Well, at least I got my name in monitoring times. When I did that, I wrote to Bob Grove, and I told him what each diode did. And this is back when you actually wrote letters.
Yeah.
And each diode, and I told him what happened. I told him the story, and he printed it in the next edition of Monitoring Times. But so it was cool, and it was a lot of fun, and you could do a lot of stuff with these. I had a 2006 that had the Bill Cheek memory expansion, had 16 groups of memories that you could select. I had a little rotary dial, and then when that one broke, I had a little dip switch connector on there you drilled a hole on the front panel. I'm pointing at the picture like you can see that. You drill a little hole on the front panel of the radio and put this little 16 position rotary switch or these 4 dip switches on there, and you can select these different memory banks, and it worked great. It had 6,400 channels on the radio.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of a GRE Whistler V folders.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. You couldn't listen to all 16 banks at a time, but you could have like 16 different radios on there.
And that's basically what the V folders are on the GREs, is you can't monitor all those channels at a given time, but you can shut off, X amount of channels and then turn on another series of channels and scan them.
Well, I had one set for Wisconsin, one set for Illinois, one set for Michigan, one set for Indiana, one set for Minnesota because I was going up there all the time. And, it was just and it made life easier. You could just swap them around. So
Yeah, and that's these radios are really cool. Anything else you want to add before I flip the
not on
slide?
this one. So I'm ready to go to the next one.
All right, so let's take a look at
Ah,
50 channels. So a little bit more channels on this portable radio.
yeah.
Realistic Pro 43 military aircrafts. I'm guessing that you had this for military aircraft and you used it.
I did. I lived right next to a naval air station in suburban Chicago at the time. And so I used to listen to the military aircraft frequencies for that. And the neat thing about the Pro 43 was it was very compact, small size, and it worked very well for military aircraft. Had decent channel memories. I had 50 channels, which at the time was plenty for what most people were doing. And you could do the cell mod on it, and if you wanted to, although by then it was, I was pretty bored with that, but it did work very well for military aircraft. And I used to use that at air shows all the time. And everybody I knew that were into air shows at the time, Ted and Fred and Joel and stuff, all had the Pro 43s because that was the radio for that.
For military air.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's take a look at some. These radios have came up a lot of times just because of the Wammo 10. The name, it's got 10 channels. Look at these vintage scanners from the 1970s. Yeah. Why doesn't the scanner manufacturers come up with funky names like Wammo?
I have no idea why they came up with that name at that time, but boy, I tell you, that was the scanner name that you remembered. And
Wammo.
These were not little scanners; these things were big.
Yeah, I remember seeing. We had a few of these in the scanner museum, right? The scanner, the National Scanner Museum, and they weren't small by any means. I mean,
no. And the digital frequency selector on the bottom was an optional thing. This was a scanner that programmed by combs, and the box on the top is a box of combs. And they looked like a comb that you would comb your hair, and it came with a little plastic tube that you would go in there and you pop off certain tines of that cone, and you would come up with a binary code. It came with a little book to tell you, okay, you want to listen to 155.475, you take comb tine number 1, 7, 13, and 24 off and stick it in the back. There was a slot and press a button, and that would program that frequency into that channel. And it worked great. You had to have one comb for each channel that you would program into it, but you could save that and use that again later if you wanted to reprogram it. And I think it came with like a box of 100 combs, and you could buy them at the time. But that Wammo 10, what a name for a scanner.
Wammo.
That was great. Yeah.
I think we've had that on our show of the unusual. I can't remember the exact show. We'll have to redo that show. It's, so we have it archived on YouTube. It was like the weird, the strange, and I forget what the show was on Facebook, but it was all the odd,
the 8-track scanner, and but that was cool. And then with that digital frequency selector, you could plug that into the back of the scanner and use that to dial in a frequency, which back in the day was revolutionary.
Yeah, because that's almost your next best thing to programmable.
Yeah,
having to be able to scroll through the frequencies and be able to listen in.
Yeah. Well, back then, a 10-channel scanner was still top of the line, and people were still buying tunable radios. That had 155 and 156. You had about this much space, so all you knew it was towards the beginning of 155. So you had no idea if it was 155.625. It was 155 point something. That was about as close as you can get with the tunable radios, and then you had these. Oh,
yeah. Once you had that position in the right spot, you weren't moving that around too much unless you wanted to.
Yeah, and I had little marks on there. I would take a pen and take a little mark on there, so I knew, okay, that's where Wheeling is, and this mark is the sheriff, and this mark is the fire channel.
Amazing things that we went through way back.
Oh, yeah.
Look at this ICOM R7000. I've heard about this a time or two. look at that wide range from basically 25 to 2000 megahertz, highly sensitive, highly selective, 99 memories. So almost 100 channels, but, just shy of one. A great radio for going up and down the dial.
Yeah, dial twiddling. This was a mil-spec radio, and they were actually created as a professional radio monitor. And it really wasn't intended as a scanner. It was intended for government and commercial users and high-end hobbyists. And I had a buddy of mine named Bob who had one of these, and I would spend hours playing with his R7000 because I couldn't afford one yet. And he even had a scanner beam on his roof of his house. And we would spend hours pointing the antenna to places and finding stuff on there. And then when I finally got one, I was on that radio with that radio all the time. And every once in a while, I worked the afternoon shift and I'd get off work at 11 o'clock at night. And me and a couple buddies would take that radio into the basement of the police station and disconnect one of the antennas from the tower from whatever radio was assigned to, and tell the dispatcher that channel's out of service for tonight, and plug it into the back of this radio. We'd have an antenna on a 110-foot tower connected to the scanner, and we would pick up stuff from everywhere. It was awesome.
How much? Do you remember how much this radio went for in its day?
Retail price on this radio was around $1,500 back then. So that would have been roughly $5,000 or $7,000 these days.
Wow. That's
used, they went for about $1,000. Nowadays, you can buy them used for about $150, $200 if they work. And the problem with these radios is they, as they get old, the internal capacitors start to dry up. And there are companies that will recap these radios, basically replace all those electrolytic capacitors. And then the dial was an electrofluorescent display, and those would die out. So I had 3 or 4 of these over the years. And I also had the R71, which was the HF version of this radio as well.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. I love the signal meter where it's an actual signal meter versus a digital signal meter.
And it was actually very accurate. It's relative, but it was very accurate. So now I still have an R8500 on my in my cabinet, which was pretty much there was the R7100, and then the R8500 came out after that. And that one's probably 15 years old, and it works like a champ.
All right, so we're going into another high-end receiver, AOR, AR8000. Look at this. This is probably the largest channel capacity that we've seen tonight, with 1,000 channels. And then we've got wideband coverage, highly selective, highly sensitive. Works well across all the bands. Look at that. And then combined, you could with the what is this called? The optoelectronic.
Yeah, the optoelectronic Scout. That's the little frequency counter device on the bottom right there. So the Scout was a little frequency counter that you can use as a regular frequency counter, would just look for a signal, or you can put it in record mode, and you would get a hit like close call hits are. We have that nowadays, and back then this was revolutionary. Nothing else was like that. And it would actually record the hits into a memory, and then you can walk through a shopping mall, and then when you came out, you'd go, okay, 155.54, 154.6, 454.7. See all the different hits you got. You could get a cable that would go from this and plug it into the AR8000, and you'd have the two devices connected to each other and walk around the mall, and the Scout would automatically program the AR8000 to the frequency that it got the hit on, so you could hear it real time, which back 25, 30, 40 years ago, it was unheard of. And and nowadays, scanners have close call built into them as that's a standard. It's like electric windows in a car. Back in the 70s, power windows were wow, this is cool. And nowadays it's like, yeah, well, let's
So,
all have that.
so I was speaking of power windows. I was sitting with my wife in the car, and you remember when you would communicate to somebody else to roll down the window.
Yeah.
If you do this to any person nowadays that's born after certain year, they're gonna be, what
Yep.
the heck? I mean, what do you do at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Press the button to press the button.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like dialing a telephone.
Yep. The old rotary dials.
Yeah, you didn't have those. I can remember the days when you would pick up the phone. This is kind of how old I am. There were some places still back in the rural areas where you could pick up the phone and tell the operator, hey, I need to talk to such and such, or can you dial this number? They didn't have direct dialing in my grandmother's house in rural Wisconsin. And that was, I was a little kid when that happened, and it wasn't long after that they actually had a dial phone. But there were times when you just pick up the phone and, hey, Mabel,
Oh yeah, you would hear like a party line type of thing.
Oh yeah, you pick it up and say Central. That's what they call them. Central was the exchange.
I can tell you that one of my grandmothers had a rotary dial phone all the way to the point where basically the telephone company said you can no longer use it. It was no longer supported technology.
Yeah.
And I think I was almost an adult and she still had the rotary dial phone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, those things were built like bricks. And
yeah, she was a Portuguese woman. And, wrong numbers, she would slam that phone hard. Yeah. She would say something in Portuguese, probably something that, was off color or whatever. And then you would hear, wham, she would these phones, you couldn't slam them.
And you'd hear that the bell kind of reverberating for like 4 seconds after she slammed the phone down. Yeah. And that was, and Dale writes, the IMTS, the original car phones had rotary dials on them. The ones that you could dial yourself. Mm-hmm. So my dad worked for a phone company, so we actually had one of those in the car and had 2 great big antennas, this high VHF antennas, and the radio portion of those old car phones was like the size of a bread box, and there were actually 2 boxes, and it was huge. But that's how it worked back then. You had to wait for the vacuum tubes to warm up.
So crazy. All right, we'll continue on here. This was my first desktop scanner, which was the Radio Shack. I believe this is what it was. I don't still own the radio, but it's a Pro 2015, 200 channels. I'd monitor my local police and fire, which at the time was Middleborough Police in Middleborough, Massachusetts. Lakeville was on the same frequency police-wise. So it was Station M was Middleborough, M1 was Lakeville for the police. And then, I monitored, the state police low band. The fire departments were on low band back then. Yeah. And the state police for Mass State Police were on low band as well. And then, of course, during those summer months, I would hear the good old signal skip, which was really cool. And, I remember monitoring, they've since closed, but I used to monitor a local taxi stand, which is Superior Cab, which is no longer in business. Yeah. And that was a hoot listening to them because, it was an older fellow that owned the taxi stand. And, you would get all the scuttlebutt, what was going in the town, picking up so-and-so again is drunk again. It was entertaining listening, and it kind of, when the police weren't busy, it was entertaining to be able to listen to that. Yeah. And then there was an older lady named Rose, and she dispatched for them for years, and she was quite a hoot and entertaining as well. So, and when I first got the scanner, this is something that my dad gave me. I never, I had this on, the moment I was awake to the moment I went to bed, I heard, I wanted to hear everything that was going on. And I was, I was hooked. I was hooked right from the get-go.
Well, we had when I was a dispatcher and then later a police officer, and in little towns. I mean, Mayberry, in the towns that I worked in, we had a taxi service in town, and they had VHF radios, and the drivers usually had scanners, so they would hear calls, and they knew that we'd be calling them, so they just go, and half the time they'd show up before the dispatcher had a chance to call them. Well, I would listen to the taxi channels as well. And because a lot of times they would see stuff, they called it a car fire or an accident or a drunk walking down the street. And I would head over to that call before I even got it from the dispatcher because of the lag time it took for their dispatcher to call my dispatcher and my dispatcher to call me. I heard about it on the scanner and I went and tracked it down, and they were listening to us. And
Yeah,
sometimes, yeah.
Same thing with a taxi company. They had a scanner at the original building was this little downtown building. It was a wooden structure, and they had a scanner in there, and they were monitoring the police. So, and then the other thing that would monitor was the bus company. So we had a third party contracted for the school buses. So I didn't, like I would still watch the TV. Remember when they used to broadcast the school closings on TV? So the way I knew is if I didn't hear by 5:30 or whatever time it was, if I didn't hear any chatter on that frequency, I knew that there was going to be no school, because usually every morning I would hear, you would hear them start, the bus drivers, they just over the radio, and I knew right away that I didn't hear enough
chatter, no school,
no school.
Hey, bring up the last comment, Bear Bull.
Yeah, let me bring this up. Here we go.
So he had a Pro 41 scanner. It only had one digit at a time. It didn't have a full display. So that would have been a 10-channel scanner, and you could program that by, and then it would show, and you would hit the hold button. It would go 154.370 on there, and then you could see what the frequency is. It would just cycle because it only had one character on the LED display.
I think I had one of those. I couldn't remember. I didn't have a chance to look it up for this broadcast, but I had a portable radio that had that type of screen, and that's how you were able to see the whole frequency. But yeah, I mean, that was another cool radio.
Oh yeah. So we had one of those in the museum, and I'd never had one of those, but yeah, I do remember seeing them.
We'll dive into my next one. This is an upgrade, a newer scanner. So when I wanted a second scanner, I ended up getting one of these, and it's just 100 channels, 10 bank. It was the BC 860 XLT. This was a really good scanner as well. I used it to monitor, all the local stuff that I wanted to monitor. I just loved, and this was another radio that, where I sat in the living room, I had this right beside me. So, I would be able to hear everything. I'd watch TV. It'd have the scanner on. I would listen all the time. I love this radio. It was flat radio, tilted up a little bit so you could see the screen and everything. But yeah, I had
a friend of mine who had one of these, and he mounted it flat onto a panel in front of him. So, it actually was
that way. Yeah.
That way. Yeah. And I thought that was a neat idea. I never had one of these scanners, but as I recall, it was one of the early ones that you could actually listen to 800 megahertz.
Yes. Yeah. And this is, if I remember correctly, this is how I started to monitor the Mass State Police at this point were testing the trunk system. So the way I was listening to it is conventionally. I programmed everything in but the control channel. And then when they were testing, it was very easy to follow because it wasn't carrying, as many conversations as the system was running. I remember the radio maintainer driving down Route 28, which is a secondary road in Massachusetts, which would take you, from the Middleborough State Police Barracks down to the Cape. And he kept announcing locations where he was at to be able to see what the coverage was on the system. And that was really cool to be listening to something that was actually being built up at the point. I mean, you've discussed a lot of trunking systems that you've listened to right off the bat, being able to discover the IDs and everything. I mean, it was kind of cool to be listening to something in the ground floor.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I had, before the Bearcat 245 came out, which was the first trunk tracker that would do EDAC systems, I had a black box receiver from Opto, and we called the OptoScan. And I had the computer program called eTrack, and it was a DOS program I had hooked up to this thing. And first couple 3 days I was listening to it, there was an EDAC system up in Wisconsin that I could hear, and the state police system was just being put up and set up in our area. And so I'm listening to that, and they came up on talk group 243, and I'm on patrol north. And then how's that sound? Okay, it sounds great. Then you come up on talk group 245, and I'm on patrol south. How does this sound? Okay, great. And then they went on and on. They had 150 talk groups. They identified each one by name on there, and I had it all written down, and I published it in one of the Karma newsletters. And I had all the talk groups for that entire system before the system went online, and before there was a trunk tracking scanner capable of listening to it correctly.
Which is super cool.
Yeah. Donnie asks, is that an LED on there on the top of the scanner?
Just the display would illuminate. That's it.
Okay. It looked like right there where it says twin turbo.
Yeah, that's
right
just,
there,
just a logo type of thing, whatever it was. I can't really see it too. I mean, we can. Yeah. Let me just do.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think that was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just whatever the logo they have for twin turbo. It matched the same color as the Bearcat font. That's over there. Let me go to the next one. I've had a whole bunch of these. And this is the first scanner that had had PL tone capability that I've owned, and it also had a awesome signal meter, which I thought was the bomb. Being able to see that signal meter, which is right above the word bear tracker. I would love it when I see that shoot up, 5 bars all the way up. This radio I programmed manually, and I would reprogram it every 6 months. I would clean it out and reprogram it. That's how, when I was a kid, I could rattle off frequencies right off the top of my head because, I would program this every so often. And I had 2 of these radios. So this was a trunk tracker. So when I was able to get this radio, I had 2 of them. So one radio was for the Mass State Police, and the other radio was for local. The reason why I had the 2 radios, because this radio could only do one or the other. It could not scan conventionally and trunking at the same time. So it could only do one or the other. So I had 2 radios. So these would stack really nice. These were, as you probably remember, Rich, honking radios.
Yeah.
I mean, they were pretty decent sized radios. And
I love that tuning dial.
Yeah, the tuning dial was awesome because you could either scroll through by frequency or channel, which made it handy when I was reprogramming it. I'd punch in the frequency and then maybe make it set so it's the channel, so I could just go to the next one and go to the next one and keep going. And then the other thing that was unique with this radio is you see how the banks were divided up. It wasn't a part of the channel keypad. It was actually up above where it says unit in Bearcat, and it's A, B, C, D, and so forth. And that's how it was identified on the screen versus bank 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. It was by a letter corresponding. But this radio was a tank. I love this radio. I don't think I kept one of these. I wish I did. I did keep a 780, which is on a upcoming slide, but I loved, the PL tone was the coolest thing, just to be able to have that. And I remember growing up, being still in Middleborough, Massachusetts at that point. I was still a kid, listening to this scanner, and I would see the signal meter go up in the middle of the summer. And I was like, why is somebody transmitting on the Middleborough police frequency? One of the times they were using the the same frequency with a different PL tone for a detail. And then the other time was Burlington, Burlington, Mass was on the same frequency as the PD, and there was signal skipping. It was just booming in like crazy. You know, I turned off the PL tone, and then what I did is I had it on PL tone search. And if you remember, did you ever own one of these?
I didn't, but I had other radios of that generation. Yeah.
And this radio was one that we mentioned, not last week, but one of the weeks where it scroll through. You would hope that they transmit long enough to be able to get the PL tone.
Yeah, and then you'd have to stop the search when they stopped talking so it wouldn't start all over again, because you knew it wasn't any of the early ones. And now we're so spoiled today for the things that we take for granted today. When you put it in tone search now, it just pops up right away. Back then you had to sit there, it would check this one. Nope. Next one. Nope.
Yeah, and you would hope that they would talk for for an extended period of time, then bang, you would get it. The thing with I use this radio a lot for the bus companies. I took advantage of when they switch contracts. A lot of times the school bus company would change frequencies. So I would typically look at the antenna that was on the school bus and then determine, okay, so they're still on VHF or UHF or whatever it may be. It was always usually VHF. So I would put in a high-low search limit in there and then search out the frequency. And I was able to find, the town had mini buses that they would use, which they owned. They were on a frequency that wasn't even published anywhere or licensed. And I was able to find that frequency. And I think that ended up in one of Rich's books, for the local handheld books. But yeah, I mean, this radio, I use this a ton.
Oh, yeah.
There's another radio. This was one of my favorite handheld radios, to the point where I actually mounted this radio in my first vehicle. So I had, I was able to pick up, something that looked like this, where it had the, for a cell phone or something that would hold. So I would use this, and I had this mounted. I think I had a suction mount to the windshield to hold the radio in place, and I had it right next to me. So I actually had two of these radios. Now, the reason why is I used one particularly in my vehicle, and then the other one I took everywhere with me. It was the first radio that had the dynamic memory structure, the architecture, which, this was the basic one. It's not systems 1 through 99, it's systems 1 through 10, but it had that same type of structure. This had 16,000 channels. It was a trunk tracker, so I'd monitor the state police, 2 AA rechargeable batteries. This was the smaller form portable. My portable radio, I used it so much that I wore out the keypad. And I'm sure, Rich, you've done that with several of your favorite portables.
Oh, yeah.
Where you wear out the writing on the keypad.
Yeah, my Bearcat 760, I had that, and my Pro 43, I wore that out too. So I had the Pro 83, which is the Radio Shack scanner of the same generation in the same case. It didn't have the DMA in it, but it was the same case, and I liked that little small form factor. It worked very well.
I love this radio. This was one of my favorite radios, and I actually had 2 of them, and it was just one of my favorite things. I love the memory structure. I was, this was a transition from a bank type of scanner to an actual scanner that had this architecture memory. And also the other thing, this was my first scanner that had alpha tagging, which I thought was the bomb at this point. I would look at the frequency on the radio and I would know that's so-and-so or so-and-so. And then just to be able to program in an alpha tag that's relevant to the particular channel. Yeah, this was the radio. One of my favorite radios.
Yeah. That was a great scanner back in its day. And again, remember, we are so blessed with what we have today. And you got to kind of go back and see what it was like back in the old days. So
yeah, so the classic radio, this one I owned. Actually, I own 2 of these. I only have one that I still have, and it's the Unit Bearcat BC 780 XLT. And this was, thankfully it wasn't $780.
No, it was $500 when it was
Yeah.
new.
Yeah, and I wanted this radio because it was so much like my 246. I want, because I was just like enthralled with the alpha tagging.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting this radio. This radio was I had one in the vehicle and I had one in the house. And I just loved it, monitoring the state police and so on and so forth. And this was the radio that I had for quite a while. This was the radio that was in my vehicle. And then once I started at Scanner Master, I ended up getting exposed to other radios just because of working there. I knew how to operate them, but I needed to learn some of the current radios. That's when I started. This was the most current radio I had. And then when I started Scanner Master, I was able to get B stock of a 996T back in the day. And then I got familiar with that. And then I really, that was, full on dynamic allocated memory structure. But yeah, I mean, this was a big change for the scanner industry. You look at the last two radios that I had, we just got into computer-based programming. We went from bank-driven scanners where you were either putting in crystals or you were typing in through a keypad. And then we went to programmable by computer. I mean, which is huge. I mean,
Well, in the 780, much like the 2004, 5, and 6 before it, started a cottage industry of modifications and accessories. Scanner Master, we back in the day sold an internal battery pack for these because there was no handheld that had the capabilities of 780 at the time. So they sold a battery pack that would go inside it and automatically recharge when you plug the power cord in. And they also sold a nylon carry case for it.
And then can't forget the custom remote head.
Yep.
That was another Scanner Master thing. And I remember before I started at Scanner Master, I was a customer before I started at Scanner Master. And I remember seeing Rich Barnett and Sumner Barnett, which is Rich's dad, when they were in, what was it, Newton? Before Natick, Needham. That's where they were when they were in the. You went to the building? Did you go to the original building?
I went to the one that was where the warehouse was on the second floor across from the railroad tracks. So I don't remember if that was Natick and Needham.
Yeah, Needham was a smaller location.
Did it have an upstairs loft?
It had, that had a loft upstairs. So you probably went to the Natick location. I went to the Needham location, and that was pretty small. They had a small office, and there was no warehouse. It was basically, Sumner and Rich would, they would have a small inventory and ship right out of there. And this is probably,
oh no, that's how I went to the other one. I must have been in Natick then because it had a big loft up in the upper.
Yeah, so in Needham, it was small time operation. This is probably before. Rich started to just dabble into selling scanners. It was mostly frequency directories, at the beginning. But yeah, the 780 was certainly a awesome radio. I mean, just I love that radio still to this day.
Yeah, I wish I would have kept a couple of them. They worked really well in aviation, which I really didn't get into as much until I got out here. So.
And then the first dynamic allocated memory radio. I'm not dynamic. First touchscreen radio. Excuse me.
Yeah.
This was the first of its industry. The Home Patrol 1, manufactured. Oh my God! Can you believe it? 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Yeah. The first zip code scanner, first touchscreen scanner. Boy, a lot of firsts.
Yeah.
And this was a radio that I didn't like at first, and I was one of the beta testers, and I didn't like it but it wasn't made for me. I was the wrong guy to test it. That's why eventually I was able to get a hold of one of my buddies from work. Said, "Hey, play with this for a couple of days and tell me what you think." He loved it. Of course, he didn't know anything about radios. Yeah.
I mean, look, I have mine on my desk right here.
Yeah, mine's right here.
Yeah, and I love this radio. I mean, this was I was working at ScannerMaster at the time when I was selected to become to work as a beta tester, and they asked me to do that, and I was all about it. I think all the guys that were in the group were baffled with it, and I was like, yeah, this is exactly what our customers need. And I remember talking to Rich Barnett, because he knew that I was a part of the beta group, and I said to him, this is going to be phenomenal when this radio comes out, because it's simple to use. It's got a touchscreen display. I mean, it's going to be something that's relatively simple. It's going to be a great entry level scanner, and plus it had digital capability. I mean, there was some things that I wish that they didn't put on the main screen, like the attenuator button.
Yeah.
I noticed, over the years working at ScannerMaster, a lot of our customers that are not so technically savvy would turn on the attenuator and they say they can't hear anything. They've had the scanner on for days and days, and they don't hear anything. And that's usually the first thing I would say. All right, do you have the attenuator on? And they say, where's that? I said, it's the middle button. The font will be red. And they say, oh, it is red. I said, yeah, press that button, turn that off. And then, then before I hang up the call, they're picking up, oh, I can hear something. Oh, there's another thing. And, but yeah, I mean, this was a good, great scanner. And this is another scanner that I had in the vehicle. So I had this one in the vehicle, and I used the RAM suction mount, which we still carry. Even the Home Patrol 2 is definitely a good scanner too. But this was one of the first ones with a touchscreen display, and I'm hoping one day we get to see something like a Home Patrol 3. I mean, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. It had the ability to do something like DMR and NXDN on it. Nobody cares about Pro Voice anymore for most areas. That by the time that a Home Patrol 3 comes out, I'm sure most of the Pro Voice will be gone anyway. But if they can do DMR, and I'm sure there's going to be some other additional things they can do to it. But yeah, it was a revolution. And once my buddy from work said, told me how much he liked it and why he liked it, that's when I realized the genius of it. And that was like, wow.
You have to, and working in sales at ScannerMaster, I knew that this was going to be a good concept, because I would typically, we used to field a lot of calls. This was, I came in at ScannerMaster when people were transitioning from banks to trunking and programming through software. And then there was a lot of hiccups, because, you had a lot of people that were doing the hobby for many years. And this was, trunking was something new, and then programming by a computer was something new. So, this hobby was being changed, majorly. And then this was an answer to some of the people that are trying to get in this hobby. Because, and especially with digital, I mean, digital and trunking changed so many things with this hobby.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, starting from the beginning, I mean, the 60s introduced crystal scanners, and the 70s introduced programmable scanners, and the 80s introduced trunk tracking scanners, and the 90s did this, and the 2000s did that, the 2010s did this. I mean, every few years there was a progression in the technology. Hey, and look at this. We've done this timeline before in one of the shows. I just wanted to show the last, several years. I mean, you look at it, within the last, 27 years, this timeline. You look at GRE. 13,
remember when they introduced their product line under their own name for the United States, the PSR 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and 600. And then
before that, they just pretty much produced Radio Shack scanners for the States.
And then Uniden, came out with the Home Patrol, which was 2010. And then 2014, look, big news, Whistler took over the product line and introduced their own radios with their own product numbers, but basically they were pretty much the same product, just with the Whistler name on it.
Yeah.
And then finally Whistler came out with an answer to the Home Patrol with the TRX 1 and 2. Well, actually the 1080 and the
and the 1080s and 1095s. Yeah. So, and then the 1098 and 1088 after that. Those are more of a competition for like the 436.
Yeah.
And then they were just the kind of incremental updates. So the 1080 and 1095 had no numeric keypad.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And then the 1088 and 1098 had the numeric keypad.
Yeah, and then we in 2018, you and I had the pleasure of introducing the SDS 100 at the Dayton Hamvention, and then 2019, which was last year, we had the SDS 200 was introduced, and then. And we even made it on the timeline with the scanner guys, launched in March of 2019. And we haven't really had anything in 2020 that's been, anything released or any big, huge news.
No, and we get that question all the time. People call us on the phone. They ask us on the show, what's coming up? And I mean, we joke about the Home Patrol 3 and the SDS 500 and stuff like that. But truthfully, guys, it just has not been anything announced since the SDSs.
I mean, if we were working on something, we couldn't tell you, but I can tell for the both of us that we're not beta testing anything at the moment. So, that's the honest truth. So there's nothing that's came out from the Uniden camp that's anything new. I can tell you this because we're not doing anything. I would keep my mouth shut if we were. But, I'm just saying right now we haven't been working on any type of new product beta testing, which I'm hoping eventually soon, they'll roll out with something interesting. But this is looking at the last 27 years, is a cool timeline. We want to, what we'll do is we'll do a couple of slides and then we'll jump into your questions. So if you haven't asked your question yet, do it in the comments right now. We'll roll into that there. 2020, Dale mentions we moved to YouTube.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's the biggest news in scanner in the scanner world in 2020.
The other big news I would say is probably the first time in a very long time there wasn't a Dayton Hamvention.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the other thing too is there wasn't a Dayton Hamvention. Let me just go over this real quick while you guys fill in your questions or comments. If you guys have any questions or comments that we don't get to during the show, or it's a more complicated thing and you want to ask it over the phone or by email, here's the information you can do. support@scannermaster.com is the best email address to send in those questions. You can give us a call at 1-800-722-6637. That's 1-800-722-6637. We're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. So certainly give us a call. Both Rich and I have phones that are, literally less than a couple of feet away from us. Mine's right over here, and I just saw Rich's light go turn on when he picked it up. So yeah, you can definitely reach either one of us by that phone. And there's my phone ringing right now. And if you're looking to shop for products and you know what you want, you can shop the website 24/7 at scannermaster.com. That's the website. And of course, Scannermaster is our sponsor. And then, of course, don't forget to sign up for the Scannermaster newsletter. We're going to be sending out our first email blast of the holiday season next Wednesday. I'll probably be mentioning what's on the email blast. I have to create it. I haven't created it as of yet. So I'll be sending out all the email blasts over the holiday season. So there'll be a series of them that'll come out typically on Wednesdays. So definitely sign up, scannermaster.com, and you can check that out on scannermaster.com. Next week's show. So I know a lot of you are a fan of this, where we kind of go all over the place. And we haven't asked the scanner guys, so definitely bring your questions next week. We'll probably have some things we'll cover during the slideshow. That'll be 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, right here on the YouTube channel. So that's Wednesday, October the 28th. I can't believe it. That's the last Wednesday of the month, and then we'll be dipping right into November. What did I see there? I just want to look at Ken's question here. Let me just.
I have not heard of them closing. As far as I know, they're still around. I have not heard of them closing.
I haven't heard it either, but I actually went there some years ago and actually picked up an antenna from them, directly from them. And yeah, they make phenomenal antennas. I had at the last house, I had the Austin Ferret, and I've used the Spectra antenna as well. I mean, they really have it's a small operation Austin antenna, so I hope I hope they didn't close. I mean, you haven't heard anything on your end.
No, I haven't, but I'm going to check tomorrow. That's for sure. So I'll double check, and at least if they have, well, at least we'll have some news for next week's show. But I have not heard of them. At least I haven't been notified, because we do sell their products. So okay, well, here, beat this.
I only have this one that I can get to. This one is the SMA version of it.
Yeah, so what I've done on my SMA Condor is I trimmed it so it fits the SDS 100, and it actually works pretty well.
Yeah, I don't have any other radios next to me other than the SDS 200 that's portable. But yeah, I mean, you're a big fan of this this Condor.
Oh yeah, it works great, and I do a lot of VHF listening, and it works really well on VHF. And from where I'm at, I cannot hear the National Weather Service with a regular scanner antenna on a handheld in my yard, but with the Condor I can. So,
Jay, that is, sorry, Rich, I'm looking at the what's on our screen, and you know what? Blame the scanner guys for me buying. Jay, you're gonna love that radio. That is, out of all the basic scanners that are out there, that's the best portable radio out there for VHF, UHF. You've got rail, aviation, marine, all
military aircraft.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the best radios out there. And I was using that when I was in Altoona.
Yeah,
that was one of the two radios I was using.
Oh yeah.
And I had that sucker on service search. That's how I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on there. Yep, fits in your shirt pocket.
And it's small and light enough. I clip it on my camera strap. You put it in your shirt pocket.
Which we do have. I don't have it within reach of me, but I actually do have it within reach. The 125 AT. You know what I was using with this, Rich? The Scanner Blaster.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was. Those of you that are not. Oh yeah, you know what? I forgot about something that that was sent in to us. So let me pull that up.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's pull that up.
Yeah, remember, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let me hit escape.
So, yeah, we love our classics and we have our favorites.
Who was it? Ira that sent this in? I think so. Yes.
Yep.
So let me pull this up. So he actually scanned in the catalog for Regency. Now look at this. I mean, you can definitely tell that this is an older catalog.
Can you make it a little bit larger?
Let's see if I can.
Can you full screen it?
Yeah, let me full screen it. They don't need to see us.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's a little bit too big. Yeah. Yeah, we'll keep it the other way. So
perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
So there's the cover. So here we have a 10-channel 5-band. This looks like I've seen this one before in the museum.
Yeah, we have a couple of those, and they had a couple different variations on that. And this was their basic 4-channel scanner. You can get it on high band, low band, UHF. They had a couple with multiple bands. They had single channel receivers. They had aviation versions of this. They had a bunch of these real basic little 4-channel scanners like this.
Yeah, and that's really cool there. So let me continue on. And here's some more radios. So we just saw one of the radios, right?
That's the Wammo 10, yeah.
Wammo 10 right there on the bottom, and then we have the other radio right on the top.
That's the Wammo 10 is the one on the top, and the bottom is the frequency synthesizer that you can hook up to the Wammo 10. It's the same size case, so that you put it up underneath the Wammo 10 and connect the cable onto the back, and then you can dial in the frequencies.
And is that somebody breaking into the house there in the little photo?
Yeah, it's a picture of a burglar, and you can listen to all the action,
And here's a whole bunch of radios on this, and I've seen all these in the scanner as well.
Now, that top one is a 20-channel VHF, UHF low band scanner. I had 2 of these at the time, one in the house and one in the car. That's 40 crystals at $7-10 a piece. Plus all my other scanners. And that was a great scanner, but it had a really funky way of setting it up. You had to put all the VHF high band channels grouped together, and then all the low band channels grouped together, and all the UHF channels grouped together, and move these little jumper cables back and forth so that it would tell the scanner what band the crystals were in. Otherwise, it wouldn't work right. But once you got that figured out, it was actually a pretty decent scanner, although the volume and sculpt controls got a little funky after they got old.
Wow. Let me, you want me to continue on with the catalog?
Continue. Yeah.
Did you want anything else on this one?
Yeah, go back. No, we're good on that one. Let's go back to the next page.
Okay.
So remember those 4-channel ones that we saw earlier? They use that same case for a bunch of different radios. And the same thing with the bottom one. They use that same general case style for a bunch of different radios. Single channel monitors, weather receivers. They even made fire alert receivers like plectrons in that same case style on the bottom.
Wow. That's super cool. Let's continue on. This we're not going to be able to read because of the font.
Yeah.
We'll continue on. I think this is the last page. And look at that. Mm-hmm. You know, the radio phones.
Yeah.
See that? They had the products.
Yeah, and they had two-way radios they sold. And again, using the same case styles as the other ones. They had a marine channel, marine radio. They had CB radios, and then they had the two-way VHF radios. We had one of our police cars had a Regency two-way radio in it with 2 channels, and it was like an auxiliary vehicle. But this was back in the 70s.
Let's. Ira also sent in some more, so we're going to go to this. This is some of the Uniden stuff. Mm-hmm. And this was the Uniden Bearcat BC 235 XLT, which is trunk tracking handheld radio. That was one of the first handhelds for trunk tracking, right?
Yeah, I think it was the first trunk tracking radio. And then they had the 245. It came out about a year later, very similar case style, and that was the first trunk tracker that had EDEX in it.
Let's. I think the next slide is just the specs on it. Had the drop-in 4-pack of rechargeable batteries, as you can see there.
Yeah, those had a blister pack batteries. Yeah.
And then look at this, and look what the headline says: the Bearcat 100, the first no crystal handheld scanner.
Yeah, we had that one on there, and you notice this one's got the threaded antenna connector. That's the one that I had, and you can see the price on it. Back in 1983, they were selling it for almost $300.
Yeah, and you notice what's on the bottom of the as a familiar telephone number. Can you see that, Rich? 1-800 scanner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I can't read it from here, but yeah, I take your word for it. Gee, I wonder where that goes now.
Yeah, it goes to Scanner Master.
Yep.
Let's take a look here. Here's the one we were just talking about just a little while ago. And this is the one that, I was using at the MBTA, and look at all the things you can monitor, on the top: aviation, weather, fire, police, railroads, EMS.
Yeah. And these were being sold back in the 1990 for about $400. They were $399.95. And then for a while, the price went up a little bit to $419, and then they went back down to $400 again.
Let me and I think that's the last one. So let me transition over that. I just saw a quick question. Let me just see here. Somebody just asked about my.
625.
Yes, yeah, 925.
925. Yeah, it shows my local time. So,
yes. So, what I'm using with this is the soft leather case, which is one of my favorites. It's got this swivel belt clip, which is here, and then I'm not using the stock antenna because I use this for rail fanning all the time. This is my go-to radio. I'm using a BNC VHF antenna, which works really well. The antenna you can purchase from Scanner Master, and the case is also available at Scanner Master.
Yep.
It's available. The case is available for this particular radio in nylon, the soft leather, and then the hard leather. For this radio, my favorite is the soft leather case.
Yeah, me too. I love that soft leather case, and it just it's like glove leather. It feels really good in the hand. So,
yeah, good question, Evan. It's a great radio. This is my go-to radio for rail fanning, and it's also a go-to radio for aviation, marine. If you like monitoring that, it's certainly. Rich coined it as the transportation scanner. So that certainly will fill those hobbies. So
yeah, absolutely. I use it. I'm a big airplane nut these days, so I use it for aviation, and of course, being a rail fan, it works great, and it does civil aircraft and military aircraft. So
I gotta pull that. Okay, so let's answer some. Oh yes, Dale, you're right. Yeah, it works with the 325.2. And
the 75 XLT and the SR30 and the 72 and the 95 and there's a bunch of radios in that same case.
Oh, not the 95.
No, 95 doesn't work on that.
No, that's a different case. It's the same case that would use for the 246 and the 95.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They have that body style that pops out
with a curve. Yeah. In the Pro 83. Yeah.
It's got curves. It's like a.
Yeah, it's got curves. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So.
All right.
I see we got a ton of check-ins, which you're going to cover, and then just let me know our first comment that we're going to put on.
All right. So we got a couple of our regulars checking in, Chris and our buddy from Papillon, Nebraska. And let's see here.
Chris asked if we're going to be broadcasting on the 11th, which is his birthday. And we are going to be broadcasting, so you'll be able to spend your evening with us, as always, on Wednesday night. Maybe what we can do is we'll have some cake in your honor.
There you go. That'll work.
Yep.
And happy birthday a couple of weeks ahead of time, and we'll make sure we mention that later. So Les has checked in. Mark's checked in. Let's see here. Let's see here. Steve, I talked my buddy from Missouri, and Dave's checking in from Buffalo, and John's from Jersey. So these are all regulars. And Bob's in Canton, Joe's out there, Jerry's in Cincy. Jerry at 59 after checked in right at the beginning of the show, and he said he saw Air Force Two take off from Lumpkin Airport just a few minutes ago. So for those there's a lot of confusion. People think that the 747 is Air Force One and the 757 is Air Force Two. Actually, in actuality, Air Force One is any Air Force aircraft that the president is on, and Air Force Two is any Air Force aircraft that the vice president is on. And if neither of those two are on the airplane, it's just SAM, a special air mission, some number, either the tail number of the aircraft or a flight number. But any aircraft that the president on is something one. So Air Force One, Marine One, Army One, depending on what type of aircraft he's in. When President Bush flew on the fighter jet to the aircraft carrier after the Gulf War was over, he was on Navy One because it was on a Navy aircraft and the president was on board. It was Navy One. So I'm not sure which aircraft that was, but if the vice president was on board, chances are it was the 757 in the same paint scheme as the 747 Air Force One type jet. Lincoln and San Diego is checking in. And Kevin's in Levittown, the first suburb. People call that was the first housing, one of the first suburban housing developments after the war. It's kind of famous for that. Check in from Sedalia. Donnie's out there. Kevin's in Georgia. I talked to somebody else from Thomasville, Georgia today, Kev. I don't remember his name, but you probably know him. It's not a big town. No. Yeah, and if you ever live in a town that's small enough where somebody says, "Hey, do you know Bill?" Oh yeah, I know Bill. Yeah. Joe's checking in from Bakersfield. It's called, otherwise known as the California version of Nashville. Mm-hmm. If you like country music, you like Bakersfield.
Yeah, so I haven't, the furthest I've been is Las Vegas and Nevada is the furthest west. So I haven't been to California.
Well, if you come here, I live about 150 miles from the California border. I could be in Bakersfield. I could leave here at breakfast and have lunch in Bakersfield.
Sounds good. That's like a plan. I'm going to hold you to it.
All righty. There you go. Of course, then you're in Bakersfield, so I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah, I think we'll get detoured several times with some rail fanning. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Paul's checking in from Connecticut. Dave's in Indiana. Sorry about that, Dave. Dale asked earlier if you got locked out of the building during your broadcast days. I think we mentioned that earlier.
Thankfully, that never happened. I did get locked out of when I worked in Boston in the traffic company that I worked for as a traffic manager. Mm-hmm. So our facility, we were in a shared office space. So our facility didn't have a restroom. So we had to go out and there was a public, like a shared restroom. So I went to the bathroom, locked myself out of there. That reminds me. So they had the door on, so the hinges were on the outside. So I went to the truck, I got a screwdriver, I popped the hinges, and I got back in. And then the person I was working with, I was the first one there, and said, "What the hell happened to the door?" Oh, I locked myself out. So I was then putting the hinges back in on the door. And mind you, the door had, which kind of made it a real pain in the butt. I had to really squeeze through there. I believe it had one of those auto closers, with the arm. Mm-hmm. So I had to pull it just enough, squeeze in, and then I had to, realign the hinges, which was interesting.
So that's the second bathroom story from Jonathan today.
Yeah.
We'll try for 3 later on today.
Well, I
locked myself out of my police car a couple times.
Well, there was actually a couple times I was extended stay in the restroom. I was directing the traffic planes, so on portable. So traffic control south plane. Why don't you hit the bike?
That's one of the reasons we always kept a portable radio in the dispatch center. Yeah. When you have one person in the dispatch center, you always kept the portable so that he could take a walk if necessary.
Well, usually the other guy that I was working with would basically, he's calling us. Say we had the north desk and the south desk. So each one of us, when there was enough people on, you would coordinate, your plane and that portion. We had 2 planes up. And I can imagine the conversation. You're going to get his plane? No, he'll get it. Sure enough, he answered it.
Yeah.
That's
all righty.
3 stories now.
3 stories now. Okay. That's enough of the bathroom stories for Scanner guys. So Matt's checking in. Dale did get himself locked out of the broadcast booth. Rod's checking in from Chicopee.
Yeah.
That's is that anywhere near where you're from? Chicopee?
Yeah, it's Central Mass. So
Okay.
I was in basically southeast
over towards Worcester.
Worcester.
West, yeah, whatever. All right, so Charlie's checking in. Dave asks if he can put a T antenna on the input of a Stridsberg and use 2 antennas. You can. Whether or not it's going to work is, try it and see how it works. I've never done it, and you might have some impedance mismatches, but that might not be a big issue. Like I say, it can't hurt to try. I've never tried it. I've used a multi-coupler in reverse, where I've used a multi-coupler to put 2 antennas or 3 antennas into one radio, and that seemed to work pretty well. But I've never used it I've never put a T connector into a multi-coupler so you get multiple antennas. So you can try it. I don't know if it's going to work very well, but give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, the worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, then you can just go back to the other the other antenna. I mean, the thing, what I would do is if you're using 2 different antennas for different reasons and you do have multiple radios, you may want to dedicate one radio just for that one antenna and those particular things you're monitoring, then keep everything else on the multi-coupler. The scenario I could think of is if you have a wideband antenna, you may want to, depending on your situation, have that connected to the multi-coupler. And if you've got a single band antenna, connect that to one of your scanners that's going to work best for that particular band.
Yeah. So Jerry's checking in. He's one of my buddies from Chicago. And at 5 after, one of our posters had a question about need a new antenna for his 396. We do sell that antenna, but I'm not sure if it's in stock. We've been having a hard time keeping those things in stock. And I think we are out of the, we are currently out of the standard SMA antenna for the 396. We have a couple third-party antennas that will work fine on it, but unfortunately, we are currently out of stock on the factory antenna for the 396. So the other thing you do too, if you have the 396, you can use the BNC adapter that came with the radio and use a BNC antenna. And if you've got any of those, so you can also use the Remtronics antenna if it's on 800. That works as well. But yeah, unfortunately, we're out of the standard wideband SMA antenna, but we do have the Remtronics.
Yeah, and here's on this page is basically favorite single band favorite antennas. So if you do have a particular band that you're looking to monitor, we do have a couple of things out of stock during this broadcast. But yeah, if you're looking for the SMA antenna, we do have we have both versions of the SMA antenna. It shows here.
Right. If you're planning on getting an SDS, or you're maybe even thinking about getting an SDS, get the SDS version of the Remtronics antenna because that will work on a 436 or a 396 as well. And then if you do end up getting an SDS, you're all set.
I'm just looking at this. I don't know why they get the. I'll talk to you about that at the end of the broadcast.
All right.
I know it says the same image for the same antenna, which is kind of weird.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but they're very similar. The only difference is the very bottom part of it. All righty. So we already talked about that. Bearable Cruising, welcome for the Bay Area. I'm not sure if that's our buddy Quince from that area or not. Let's see here. Bill had one of the scanners we were talking about. I think at the time we were talking about those Regency 8 channel ones. He had one that was on VHF low and high. They originally came out with single band versions of those old crystal scanners, and then they had dual band versions, VHF and UHF, or low band and high band, or low band and UHF, that type of stuff. So another scanner we didn't mention was the Bearcat 350. Those were cool scanners. They were big. They had a fluorescent display, and they had a bunch of service search buttons on it. And I had one of those for a short while. I traded it with a buddy of mine, and then he wanted to get it back because he didn't like the radio I gave him. So we were talking about that 4-pin connector on the back of the old Regency scanners. Apparently, some of the Bearcat scanners of that genre had the same type of connector, like the Bearcat 1, the Bearcat 2, the Bearcat 3, and the Bearcat 4 all had that 4-pin connector. And Steve tells us that was called a Jones connector. Kevin is in Fond du Lac, loving the show. And let's see here. We talked about the crystal, the third overtone logic on the scanner crystals, and it's how you used to do the math to figure out what the actual crystal frequencies were. Joe's first scanner was a Pro 39 10-channel programmable. That was the handheld. Those are pretty decent basic scanners. Kevin used to get his crystals from Jan Crystals. There is Jan. There was ICM, International Crystal Manufacturers, Bomar, and a couple other companies that sold them that you could buy directly, or you go to your local Radio Shack, or if you had a scanner store in your area. Dale had 2 of the Bearcat 250s, so that means he had a Bearcat 500, I guess. But those 250s were great scanners back in the day. Lincoln says the Bearcat 210 was epic. Yeah, that was the first widely available keyboard programmable scanner. It was 10 channels. And it would retain it had a 9-volt battery on there to retain the memories. But when you turn the radio off, it would not retain your lockouts or your delays. But there were only 10 channels, so it was no big deal. But that was a great scanner. A buddy of mine at work had one and let me play with it. Chris says he came across 2 businesses that make circuit boards. They could print a board that you could program it and then install it in one of those vintage scanners to run the lights. So that's kind of a neat idea. I know a few people who will take these scanners and no longer work as radios, but they like the look of them. So they'll wire them up so that the lights go on. And it just kind of looked cool. They like you see the rotating lights. So yeah, you could design a circuit to get the lights to flash in sequence. I had a bunch of those old Bearcat 2, Bearcat 3, Bearcat 4 style scanners with that great big oval speaker grill. And they made great external speakers when the radios no longer worked. And I had a couple of those that I'd set up, and I just wired it up as an external speaker for my other scanners that actually still did work at the time. Joe had an 85 Ford Ranger. He knows that cubby I was talking about where I put my Bearcat 220 in. And then later I replaced that with a Bearcat 2020, which was the same thing, but had A/B switch on it. Yeah, it fit in there perfectly. And let's see here. Dave had a Bearcat 2020 from Penny Outlet in Tempe, which is in the East Valley here in Arizona. And he worked for Penny at the time. Oh, I'm sorry, J.C. Penney's. Okay. I was thinking Penny Outlet. Yeah, J.C. Penney's. Yeah, that was another. It was Montgomery Ward, Sears, J.C. Penney's, and there might have been one other department store that private labeled various scanners with their name on it. So yeah, I forgot about J.C. Penney's did sold scanners back in the day too. I remember the Montgomery Wards used to have a shelf with scanners on it, and it was one of the few department stores that had multiple scanners. Tony had his first scanner was a Pro 23 4-channel crystal scanner. Radio Shack did kind of a weird thing. They reused the model numbers. So a lot of the 2-digit model numbers, there might have been more than one scanner with that same model number. So there would have been a Pro 23 and a Pro 23. They're totally different scanners. Bearcat did the same thing, but they usually, at least they put a letter at the end. Let's see, Ani 64. His first scanner is a Pro 39. We talked about that one a little earlier. He used to pick up some cell phone calls and cordless calls. Yeah, you used to be able to listen to both cordless and cellular calls on scanners. Nowadays, you can't listen to either because of newer technologies. Joe still has his Pro 2006. They're great scanners. They'll do FM Neuro, so they'll work on the current channels, and they work great on aviation. They don't do digital. They don't do trunking. Chris writes that there was a person on YouTube that you could adjust the frequency of a crystal. You'd use a very fine grit sandpaper to raise the frequency and add a little weight to it to lower the frequency by applying it to the quartz. So you basically have to open the metal canister that the crystal is in and either reduce the weight to increase the frequency or to decrease the frequency, add a little bit of weight to it, and that would slow or speed up the oscillation rate when a little voltage was applied. That'd be kind of hard to get it to the right frequency, but if you were patient, you could probably do that. Excuse me. Scott's checking in from Lubbock, Texas. He almost fell asleep. Good thing he before the show started. Good thing he had notifications set up. And we were talking, Lincoln checked in, he had 6 scanners that work and 5 that don't. And I don't remember which scanners we were talking about at the time. And I saw that pop up and I was going to make a note of it, but I forgot which one he was talking about at the time. So Lincoln let us know which scanners that was. Don is our buddy from Bermuda. We got a couple guys from Bermuda that checks in every week. Scott still has, and he still uses his Bearcat 148 and his Pro 95. So the 148, I had a couple of scanners of that genre back then, but the Pro 95, the Pro 92 turned me off on Radio Shack programmable scanners. There was something about that scanner, I hated it, and I just despised it, and I bought one and I sold it for whatever I could get for it just to get rid of it. And I stayed away from it for a long time, and then the Pro 95 came out, and I don't know what it was, but I got that Pro 95 and I liked it. And that brought me back to the Radio Shack fold for a while. Bear Bull had a Pro 2005 back in the day and a Pro 30. And then he had one scanner. We couldn't remember which one he had during the earthquake back in 89. I don't remember, was that Loma Prieta earthquake? Was that the one that happened during the World Series game?
I'm not familiar with the earthquake.
Yeah, there was a World Series, and I don't remember. I think it was in either Oakland or San Francisco. I think they were playing each other. It was the Bay Area Series. They had an earthquake right during the game or during pregame or something like that.
Yeah, I would have been 9 years old then.
Yeah. So Jane is back. Jay is back being Jay again. I think he was Apple iPad guy, and before he got his name changed again. He probably signed into the wrong account. Let's see here. Joe, these days, he doesn't sell any of his old scanners. He keeps everything. Yeah, I had a whole bunch of scanners back in the day, and I used to sell them when I wanted to get new stuff to get the money to buy the new stuff. Now that money is not so big of an issue, I get rid of stuff or sell stuff because I'm running out of room, you know. So, but there are a lot of old scanners I kind of wish I still had. Les had a 2004 and a Pro 34, Pro 36, and a Pro 43 portable. So the 34 and the 43 were kind of big, well-known Radio Shack scanners. The 34 was big, and the 43 was little, and they worked really well. And let's see here. Our Bear Bull had a Pro 95. He loved it. Tony had the Pro 43. He used it for military aircraft. With the name like Wammo, you better be big. Yeah, you betcha. Don had a 2006. So there was a scanner, and I don't remember which scanner we were talking about at the time, but it was in the movie Thief with James Caan. I don't remember which radio we were talking about at the time, but that would be a good one because we're playing a show on movie scanners.
We are?
So we'll have to. We are. Isn't it one of our scanners in the movies? Oh, no, that was trains in the movies. Okay, that's our other. We have two different shows. I forgot about that, yeah. Oh, hey, maybe we should do that, scanners in the movies.
Well, the thing is, you don't watch a lot of this stuff, so it would be a lot of research on my end.
Yeah, well, might as well get you to do something. You know, I'm sick of doing all the work.
What?
I just teasing. Yeah, I'm just teasing. You do some of the work.
I do. Think up there. I mean, all the complex skill, all this crap I'm drawing, circles and all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we all know who the star of the show is. Yeah, you betcha. All righty. Dave had an R7000. He paid $900 for it back in 1990, so he must have gotten it used because that was about the going rate for used R7000s back then. If you got a new one for that price, you got yourself a good deal, my friend. And like I say, 8500s, which are a lot more current radios, they're still going for $600, $700, $800 used, and those are 20-year-old radios. Les had an AR8000. Dale had an AOR 2002. That was another good wideband receiver back in its day. Steve's last party lines, yeah. And rotary dial IMTS phones. The stuff that, again, we're so spoiled with cell phones these days. And, back in the day, we didn't have that kind of stuff. And the only reason we had a car phone in our car was because my dad worked for the phone company. And that was his job. So, and that was back in the 70s. Don still has his AR8000, still works, and he also had the AR5000, which was his little brother. The AR8000 wasn't really a scanner as much as it was a communications receiver. And it was meant, like the R7000, it was kind of meant for searching stuff out and tuning into a frequency. So we already talked about that one. Chris had an R71A in mint condition. He got it at a thrift store for $7.50. That was a deal of the century. People had no idea what they had at the time. They could have sold that for several $100s. My wife thinks I'm crazy because I'll want to stop in and check out the Goodwill every once in a while because you never know when you're going to find something crazy like that because they just don't know how much something like that's worth. You had your 860. Steve had his 855 XLT, about the same genre. Mm-hmm. And let's see here. Oh, Bill had a good question. Why does it matter what PL tone if we're only listening? So there's a good reason. And you spoke about a little bit about that earlier. When your local police frequency, you could see the signal strength indicator going. You couldn't hear it because there was another agency on there. So we would use it pretty much for why the agencies or the companies will use it, so that you can listen to only what you want to listen to instead of everybody who's on that frequency. I use it more of a fingerprint. When I see that frequency with this PL tone, then I know that is Winnetka. And if I see that same frequency with a different PL tone, it's Sauk Village. Or the other PL tone, it's Downers Grove. So there's a couple of different agencies using the same frequency, but they all have different PL tones. So you can use that as kind of a fingerprint to figure out who's talking on that frequency at the time. So, and if you're picking up skip, it's a great way to try to figure out where that skip is coming from. Back in the day, when I would see 173.8 come up on a low band frequency on 42 megahertz, I knew that was South Carolina. And then there were other PL tones that were, Ontario, Provincial Police, or Missouri Highway Patrol. They had all their standard PL tones, so you could get a good idea of who it was. So Ani 64, he wore out the number buttons on his Pro 39 and the screen light. Yeah, a lot of us have done that. You've done that, haven't you?
Yeah.
The SDS 200, Ron didn't like, we were talking about our favorite scanners. He liked this 200, but apparently he didn't like the 100. He felt cheap. I've kind of gotten just the opposite. I think the 100 feels more professional than the 200.
It's light. I mean, that's the thing. It's
Yeah, it could be.
Well, mine's light right now because it doesn't have a battery in it.
Yeah, yeah. You put the battery in there, that'll weight it down a little bit.
Yeah, but the radio, I don't have the battery in it because I've been plugging it in, so I don't worrying about charging the battery. But yeah, it's even with the battery, it's pretty light.
Oh yeah. The question came up about discriminator taps. So we can spend an entire show talking about discriminator taps, and they're not as useful now as they were years ago. But the discriminator tap, basically what that is you mount a jack on the radio and you wire it into a specific point on the radio to get raw, unfiltered audio. And while you don't use that to listen to because there's no squelch and there's no audio processing, but it allows you to use decoders to decode the PL tone or the touch tones or the other data that's coming off that channel. You can run that through a computer or to a decoder. In fact, I have a PL decoder down here hooked to my R8500 to the discriminator so that I can pick up PL tones because the 8500 doesn't have a PL decoder. And so you can also use that for some of the older programs that would decode trunking channels or paging codes and that kind of stuff. So most radios don't come with the discriminator tap built in, but you can add it onto. In fact, I had a Pro 83 that I put a discriminator tap on for a portable, and I've got a couple of radios in my cabinet that have discriminator taps on them if I ever need them. These days, most of the scanners already decode PL tones, and there are computer programs that will decode the trunking data without having to have a discriminator tap, but it's still occasionally useful for some people. Les has two 895 scanners and a Home Patrol 1. Those are scanners that we talked about at length. So Chris asks, he's got the Bearcat 780 software, and he's not sure if it's copyright protected or not. So it depends on the software. So if it's like,
there was several softwares that came out. I remember Scanner Master sold one that was prior to the partnership with Butel Software, and I remember there was in my office in Holliston, there was a red binder which I had to consult for years, and it's probably still in that office. Has the product keys for those.
Yeah.
And I would have to physically look them up. But yeah, it depends on the software. There was several softwares that came out with the 780 because it was one of the first radios that actually software was very important to be able to program it easily. And I know Butel has got software for the 780 as well, which I'm not too sure if it operates on Windows 10. I know a lot of the older ones do not.
Yeah, it's a Windows 7 only, or Windows 32-bit software. So if you got 32-bit Windows 7 or XP or 98, it'll work on that. It won't work on 64-bit. But yeah, there were some DOS programs, and I think there was even a Mac program that worked on the 780 back then.
What happened? They dropped the ball after that.
Yeah, I know, but it was such a popular radio. And it was the radio to have, like the SDS is now. It was the radio to have back then. So I'm not sure your particular software, what the copyright situation is, but you might have to check on that. And if it works, great. Yeah. Mike has got he still has a couple of his old radios, the 210, 895, 950 XLT with the G Whiz board. All right, so the G Whiz board, that was a little board that you would put in 800 megahertz scanners before there were EDX capable scanners. On EDX systems, when the original systems, when the mobile or base station radio would key down, there would be I guess they called a rescan tone that was sent. But what they did to kind of discourage scanner listeners a little bit was, instead of just that tone, it would be they would put a little jingle. It was the GE "We Bring Good Things to Life" jingle on some of the systems, and you would hear that little bit of 2 or 3 seconds worth of music on that channel. So if you were doing the hit the scan button trick, it would kind of block you from that. Well, there was a entrepreneur out there who came up with a circuit that would detect that and then force the radio rescan automatically and allow you to do that. So I had one of these in my 2004 or 2005 at the time, and it worked great. The 950 XLT was the Scanner World version of the Bearcat 760 XLT, which was the immediate predecessor of the 780. It was very small, low profile, and it was a great scanner back in the day. Encryption is trying to kill the hobby. Yeah, but the thing is with encryption is, if people stop listening to channels that are encrypted, they'll find something else to listen to. Just like trunking killed the hobby, and 800 megahertz killed the hobby, and digital killed the hobby. Maybe one of these days it'll be something, obviously they'll never have something to decode encryption, but maybe if we can limit encryption, that might help. But this hobby has been there's been several things that were going to kill scanning, and it hasn't. So maybe, hopefully encryption won't do that as well. We talked about Austin. Dale's first programmable scanners with the old Tenelec Memory Scan 1 and the MCP 1. So, yeah, I never had the Tenelec, but I knew somebody who did. And that one was the 16 channels and had little binary switches. And again, those original scanners that either had combs or binary switches or punch cards, they would come with a frequency book. And you'd look up the frequency and figure out which holes to punch, which tines to break, or which switches to switch to program the channel. It was very tedious, but once you got it, you didn't have to buy the $5 crystals all the time. Let's see here. Rail fanning for 2020. We spoke about rail fanning in one of our previous shows, and plus we did a rail fan show on our other channel the first week of October. We did rail scanning.
Yeah.
So,
rail scanning is on the Train Aficionado YouTube account. Let me just put up the slide so we can just see.
Sure.
Here we go. Waiting for it to load. Hopefully it loads correctly. Yep, there we go.
There you go.
So check out the Train Aficionado YouTube account. Make sure you subscribe there. We did 3 shows already over there. We did an introduction show, which was our first show in September. And then our next show for October, the first Monday, was the rail fanning with scanners. Yep. And then we had a bonus broadcast live from Altoona. And that was rail fanning in Altoona. And then the next broadcast, which is the first Monday of each month, which is Monday, November the 2nd, the day before Election Day, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Time. We're going to be talking about trains in the movies. So that'll be an interesting one. And then not too sure what we're going to have planned for the December broadcast, but we'll certainly figure that one out.
Cool. Dale still has his Memory Scan 1, his MS1. That's a classic scanner. Boy, I wish I had one of those. We were talking about the 780 with the alpha tagging, and that was the bomb, man. He loved that. So let's see here. Ken's got the Austin Condor antenna. Ron asks, what's a good all-frequency antenna? Well, again, if you're looking for a portable antenna, the Condor. If you're looking for a mobile antenna, we got the Spectrum Force mag mount. or the Comtelco, which are the most popular mobile antennas. And for a base station, you can't beat a discone, or you can't go bad with the discone. You can beat a discone, but you can't go bad with it.
What do I got for antennas here? Got a few.
Oh yeah. I keep a coffee cup of antennas, so I got a few here. So
I got a few things here.
Yeah. Oh, we've all got our toolbox with scanner stuff in it. Yeah.
That's this. There's this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're a little more organized than I am when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. This.
All right. Next week's show is going to be all about Jonathan's scanner stuff, organization hints. There you go.
Yeah, well, that's. Yeah, I just got to keep track of it, especially after moving.
Yeah.
You know, that was the main reason to get everything a little bit organized. I don't want to lose this stuff while I'm moving. You know, I have so many different BNC, SMA, adapters and things like that. I mean, you're bound to lose stuff when moving. So that was part of the project when I moved, to be able to put some of the things together. I mean, that's
5 years ago when I moved from our house where I'd lived for 20 years and then moved out across the country, kind of like what you did a couple of years ago. I got rid of so much stuff. I mean, I got rid of dozens of old scanners and boxes full of parts and accessories and stuff. And a lot of that stuff I wish I still had. But again, it's, you got to cart that across the country. And a lot of that stuff was in the box from when I moved then into that house. So I moved out of the box for 25 years.
Well, I've used some of that stuff. The adapters show. I have one of those cases that's got all the various adapters, and that was part of the Wayback Machine about a year and a half ago when I was broadcasting live from the camper. Those are some interesting shows to look back on. What else do we got here for questions?
Well, let's see. Will said he had a Wammo 10 with the digital frequency selector. Cost him about $500 back in the 70s.
Wammo.
The Wammo 10. I just love that scanner. That was such a great name. The Regency LMR mobile radios had the same type of case. He had them for his TV station radios. So, like I say, I had one of those in that same metal case, and they had a couple of the scanners, and they had marine radios, they had alert receivers, they had weather radios, they had all kinds of different stuff that they would use the same case hardware for. So Les had the 235 and the 245. That was the first trunk tracker and the first EDX tracker. And Bear Bull remembers that the growing pain days in scanning, a lot of people dropped out of scanning because of 800 or because of trunking or because of digital. And I know those people too. And, and then you wait a little while and they're going to come up with a new technology for the scanners. So,
yeah, I mean, that was the big learning pain when I started Scanner Master. I was in the ground floor of trunking and programming the scanners by computer. And that was the big, there was a lot of groaning and moaning and groaning. Just regarding these changes.
Todd asked if we can recommend a good base station antenna for his 996P2.
The ST2, if it was still manufactured for Rich.
If I could buy the ST2 designs and make them myself, I would, and I'd make a killing on it. I've got four of them up my attic. So
see, he's got so many of them. He's not even sure how many there
are. I
are.
had to count. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. So these days, the Discone is probably going to be kind of your best all-around antenna. It works pretty well on just about everything. You can't go wrong with it. You can get an Austin Ferret, which if you've got room for it, and there's other scanner antennas out there, but those are are going to be the best bet this time. You were talking earlier about the scanner blaster, using it when you're rail fanning. Tim says they're good for the use in the drag strip.
Oh,
And
I'm
if you've
sure.
ever been to the races, they are loud.
Very, very loud. The scanner blaster works really well. I was using that for rail fanning, and I probably had the 125, probably had it on maybe number 3 for volume,
Yeah.
and that was just enough. And the trick with that is when you're not using it to pop the battery out, because there's no on or off switch, so you got to leave the battery out, and then that's what I did throughout the time I was there. When I was not rail fanning, I'd pop the battery out and then put the battery back in. I did carry the charger with me in case I needed to charge it. But yeah, that was the best thing, being able to pop the battery out, and because it's just going to keep the speaker powered. And, the next time you go to use it, it's going to be dead.
Yeah, I think the reason why they don't put a power switch on there is they anticipate that when you're not using it, it's plugged into a USB connector to charge up the battery.
Yeah, I don't use it that often to use it as a daily basis, so I take the battery out.
Yeah. So me too. So that way, at least you don't have some charge to it. So let's see. Gene's checking in. Howdy, Gene. So Evan asks, is the distortion issue with the Home Patrol 1 any better in the Home Patrol 2, and is it as good as the SDS? The Home Patrol 2 will work a little bit better on simulcast than the Home Patrol 1, but neither one of them work anywhere near as well as the SDS. The Home Patrol 1 and 2 have a very similar receiver to the 996 and the 536. It does not have the SDR capabilities of the SDS. So it might work for you, but it might not. So
yeah, I mean, it's a very if you're not dealing with simulcast, the Home Patrol 1 and 2 are very solid on digital. I mean, they work really well. I mean, I've used that radio for multiple things, such as rail fanning. Works really well on that. Still, it's an all-around good scanner. It looks like David is also having a birthday on the 11th as well. So, happy birthday to you. That is, and I agree with Joe. Never get old, stay young forever. I'll put that right up on the screen.
Yeah, I plan on never growing up. So if you don't grow up, you can't get old. So, let's see. Donnie says any airplane the president is on is Air Force One. Any Air Force plane that the president is on is Air Force One. When he's on the Marine helicopter, it becomes Marine One. And if it's on a Navy aircraft, it's Navy One and so forth. But yeah, any Air Force aircraft that he's on is automatically Air Force One. And if he is on a non-military government aircraft, it's called Executive One. So if you ever hear those terms on the radio, then you know the president's around. In fact, the president, I did hear Air Force One on air traffic control yesterday, the day before, when he flew down into across Arizona. So that was pretty cool. I mean, like him or not, to hear the president on the radio or to see Air Force One is always a thrill.
Well, you're not
no matter who the president is.
Well, you're not hearing the president on the radio.
No, just to hear Air Force One come. And can you imagine being an air traffic controller and working Air Force One?
Yeah.
I've had some friends. I got a friend of mine who was an Air Force, air traffic controller at O'Hare Airport, and he worked Air Force One several times with several different presidents. And he says, no matter how jaded you get in that business, to work Air Force One on the radio is a thrill. Even though you're talking to an Air Force colonel or general, not the president, but just to be able to talk to the president's airplane at school.
Okay.
All righty. So if you're Dale says that in his state, if you the radio calls for the governor is Gov 1 and AG 1. So most states will have a special call sign for their higher up executives, and that's pretty common. And a lot of times it won't be the actual executive himself, but his driver or security officer. Doug's checking in from New Brunswick, a longtime Scanner Master fan. He loves the podcast, so thanks for that. Klein is checking in from Satsuma, Alabama, near Mobile. My mom grew up across the bay in Fairhope, so she's an Alabama girl. So I'm sure you know where Fairhope is there, Klein. And we didn't talk about two of Joe's favorite radios, the Pro 92 and 2067 and the 2096 and the Pro 96. We did speak about the Pro 92 a little bit. I didn't like that radio, but then the mobile version of that was a 2067. And why they didn't call it the 2092, I mean, it was basically the same radio, but the mobile version. But for some reason, they called it the 2067. Who knows? And then the Pro 96 and 2096. And those were very popular radios in the day because they were the first Radio Shack scanners that worked on digital systems. And better than the original Unitons, they worked on 9600 baud P25 systems instead of the 3600 baud P16 systems. Or they worked on both, actually. And Chris had a question. We kind of very similar to what one was asked before. About a vehicle, can you put a Y adapter from the stereo and add the stereo antenna to the scanner? We used to sell a product that allowed you to do just that. It was basically an antenna splitter, and I don't know if we still have that or not, but there was actually a device that would allow you to do that. I don't think those are available any longer, or at least not from us. But to tell you the truth, you're better off putting a real scanner antenna on your scanner than try to use your broadcast antenna. It's going to work much better. Anthony's got a Pro 436, Pro 436, and he's rubbing the buttons off of that. Yeah, you can do that. Is there any way to restore or protect it without doing a full scanner cover? I don't know of any. The problem is the labels are kind of silk screened onto the buttons, and they're going to wear off.
A carrying case will protect your buttons.
Yeah, the carrying case would do it, yeah. And then you can replace the carrying case pretty easily. You can replace keyboards on scanners. In fact, I've done that on the Pro 43 because those were really bad about rubbing off. So I actually went out and bought a couple, 3 or 4 of those things just so I have them available.
That was an FM coupler. We used to carry that. I don't think we carry it anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't see it there. So, so let's see here. Okay, so why are prices so different between stores on the STSs? So the STSs have a fairly universal price for most reputable scanner dealers. $649 for the SDS 100 and $699 for the SDS 100. You might see prices differ. In some places, they might have some sort of special deal, or more likely, if it's something like Finger Hut or one of those other joints, the prices will be ungodly high, $9.99 or something like that.
Well, the main reason, let's address it, because I was part of the discussion with the main reason why is the big Amazon stores were basically undercutting a lot of the scanner companies, Scanner Master, the other competitors, direct competitors. I'm not going to name them, but so Uniden basically put map pricing on the STSs, just so there's not a price war on them. And they will hold, the major outlets, including Scanner Master, to that price. That was a big issue. I mean, you think of like a larger company like Amazon that's not providing customer service or providing any support whatsoever. It's a smaller operation. The other thing, too, is they're selling, thousands upon thousands of products. They can take a loss on one particular item because they want to offer this item, and they gain it on other things. So that was one of the reasons why that Uniden basically did, map pricing on the STSs. And the other thing too is just, working for the company since 2008, I've seen the petty things that a lot of our competitors have done. being $5 cheaper, or being, change on a dollar, just to be, and it
lower.
just gets into this stupid petty war. I mean, the grand scheme of things, not going into basically what we make we don't make a lot of money on the scanners for the most part. So everybody makes whatever that profit is on the scanner. And when you keep getting into a price war, you're just cutting your profit down smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually, you're not making anything or hardly anything to keep the lights on. So, and that's the whole thing of it. I mean, Uniden realizes that the Scanner Master and the other two, now we're down to basically two other companies that are scanner only, needs to be able to keep the lights on, and they can't compete with big boy, whether it be Walmart with its online Amazon type of shop, or it's Amazon itself. I mean, that was the big issue we were running into.
And we get calls from people all the time. Hey, I bought the scanner on Amazon. Can you tell me how to program it? If you bought it from us,
I mean, that's the other reason why. I mean, a lot of people say, why is Amazon so much cheaper than you with various things? And that's part of the reason. Is one, we're a smaller operation. We have to be able to keep the lights on. Two, is you've got a 1-800 number, and you're going to be able to talk to somebody that's knowledgeable about the product. I remember back in the day when going to Radio Shack, you would pray that certain people would be on, because there would be certain people that would be on their staff that were completely knowledgeable about scanners. And then other people, they knew here and there, but they really didn't know anything about the scanner product line. So, I mean, with Scanner Master, at least I can say for myself and Rich, as you can tell, we host a show every week, so we know a thing or two about scanners. I mean, even our programming staff, they know a lot about scanners, and they're able to do it correctly. I mean, that's why we pride ourselves as being the experts in the industry. But that's what you're paying for in the grand scheme of things. Keep the lights on.
We may not be the cheapest, but we're the best.
Yeah. And that was the whole story with that.
All righty. And that's all I've got to say about that. Is that what Forrest Gump used to say?
I was getting a little bored over here because, you just go on a tyrant, and I'm just sitting.
I know. I know. And you just sit there. Yeah.
I know. On my thumbs. Okay. On and upwards. So what else do we got here?
Let's see. Donnie had the Bearcat, the Uniden 177 XLT. I don't remember that one.
I never owned.
Did you remember? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember that one. The Fox BMP scanner used to fit in a map pocket on his Trans Am back in the days. He was one of those guys. I bet you had T-tops on your Trans Am there, Dale. And let's see here. I was a Mustang guy myself, and I used to smoke Trans Ams with my Mustang. You had a 302 Mustang, and it was in a powder blue, and it wasn't with the GT package, but it was fast, and I could wipe out a Trans Am, and it was a total sleeper car. Nobody knew it was fast. So that's a 177. That looks like the 860 that you had, sort of.
Yeah. I mean, it looks exactly the same. The only thing is it has this was only 16 channels. So it didn't have very much of a memory capacity. And plus, it didn't do the 800 megahertz from what I can see, because it doesn't show it on there. But I mean, this is something I was able to find on eBay that's going for $57, I think.
Gee.
Yeah. So there's that.
That's as an antique store. And K-Love's scanner was a Bearcat 55 XLT. That was another one of those very basic. I think that was like a single or 2-digit display.
55
XLT, yeah.
Let's see. Another eBay. Let's see what this looks like. Do we get a photo? Oh, this one's $14.
Oh, that's a little better.
Here it is, right here. You were right about the display being small.
Yep. So, and then let's See, remember we were talking earlier about the ball game, the World Series game that had the earthquake. That was actually across the bay at Candlestick Park, which is the park that the Giants used to play in. They moved off to a new field now. Have you ever? You've never been to Frisco? I've been to 2 games at Candlestick Park, and both of them were in July. They're 2 Cubs games. They're 2 separate on 2 nights. I went there to see the Cubs games, and it was both of them in July, and I froze my tail off. If you've ever been to Candlestick Park, it got cold there at night.
I would love to do that would be a cool thing to do. A lot of people have done that. Travel to each baseball stadium across the country. I would love to do that. I was thankful to have the iconic Fenway Park, to be able to go there multiple times. I mean, that is just phenomenal history, and I'm just happy to, that they're still improving upon it and making it still relevant for this time.
Oh yeah.
I know, the original Yankee Stadium, they tore that down and they put up a new Yankee Stadium, but still, I mean, all the history of the original location, it kind of, I mean, it's kind of sad to see something, where these classic ball players have played on that field,
Oh yeah. Even the old Tiger Stadium was a total dump, but it had a personality to it. The new places don't have that kind of personality. See here. Tony's checking in from Modesto. That's in the Central Valley of California. It was a 7.1 earthquake, by the way, back then. Gray Wolf has got an SDS 200 and a RSP Duo. That's an SDR. I've got one of those around here someplace, I think. And then he used to have a 780 XLT and probably either 785 or the 796. So when the 780 came out, it was followed up a couple years later by the Bearcat 785, the same case style, but it had a slot in the back where you could put a digital card in and listen to P25 digital. And then that digital card was optional on the 785. And then they had a companion handheld scanner called the 250, which same capabilities and same thing. You put the card in there. And then that one was replaced by the Bearcat 796 and Bearcat 296 handheld. The digital card came with it, but it also did 9600 baud P25 systems like they had in place in Colorado and Michigan at the time. Yeah, all righty. So moving on. The Kojak TV show had a handset attached to an old Bearcat scanner in his car. That to use that for the police radio on the old Kojak show. That was the bald guy with the Tootsie Pop, I think.
Oh yeah. I can probably pull up a.
Yeah. And I remember when I saw that TV show, I think, wait a minute, isn't that the guy from the James Bond movie? He played one of the Bond bad guys in one of the James Bond movies back in the day.
Do you remember? You know what his catchphrase was?
No, I never watched the show.
See, we would never be able to do this because you don't watch any of the
No.
Who Loves You, Baby?
Who Loves You, Baby? Yeah, like I said, I was never a big TV fan, and back then I didn't watch cop shows so much. I watched a couple of the better ones like Police Story and Hill Street Blues because they were more realistic most of the time.
Well, because you played one in real life. Why are you gonna?
Well, that's true. Yeah. So let's see here. Great opening to a movie with the scanners in the car and the pockets. Yep. Absolutely. We'll have to do that. Steve had a Radio Shack Pro 7B, and that was one of the old crystal scanners with the real thin line of lights across it. And they were the yellow, amber in color. I remember those. The question came up earlier about PL tones and why they would use PL tones. And if two different agencies use two different PL tones on the same frequency, won't they talk over each other? Yeah, they do. Most of the time, it's not a problem because they're geographically separated enough where your dispatcher will be strong enough to overcome the other guy that's 100 miles down the road. He might be able to hear him, but with the PL tone, it masks it so you don't hear it. And most of the time, they won't interfere with each other because they're too far apart. And then Kevin asks what PL tones are. He's got an SDS 100. So PL tones are, just real briefly on this, there is subaudible hum that's imposed on the signal, and it's kind of a code, and it will tell the other radio, hey, open up, I've got a signal for you because I've got this PL tone, and you tune your radio in to that frequency and that PL code, and your radio will only listen to stuff on that PL code. The PL stands for private line. The actual official name for it is Continuous Tone Coded Sound Squelch, or CTCSS. And there are a couple other companies that have different names for it: private line, private code, quiet call, all kinds of different names for the same technology. Michigan State University, are they moving all their talk groups over to the state digital system? Chris, I'm not sure, but if you check on the radio reference database, I'm sure it'll be listed there, and I'm sure they'll talk about it in the Michigan forums over at Radio Reference as well. Dale expands on our PL tone thing. PL tones will cut out most intermod issues as well. So yeah, if you have a receiver with a PL tone protecting it, it will help decrease the amount of intermod that might get injected into that signal, because that intermod might not be transmitting that PL tone. And let's see here. Gray Wolf didn't like the SDS 100 because he didn't like the keyboard. Yeah, I've heard some people say they don't like that membrane keypad. I don't have a problem with it, but there are other people who prefer the buttons, the actual physical buttons versus the membrane. Yeah, I kind of go either way on that one. I don't have a problem with the keypad, but then again, the radio is still relatively new, it's only a couple of years old. We'll see how well it works 5 or 10 years from now. So, and then the further questions about the PL tone, Kevin, do we need to know the PL tones? If you don't know what it is, just leave it off, and you won't have to worry about it. And you'll hear everything on that frequency. And once you understand the concept and the details about it, then you can start programming for PL tone if that's going to help you out. So if you don't know about it, just forget about it and you don't have to worry about it. Let's see here. So we were talking about running old versions of software on newer computers. Sometimes you can make older versions of software work in what's called compatibility mode. If you right-click on the icon and then go to Properties, and you can select Run in Compatibility Mode, sometimes that will allow older software to work on newer computers if they don't work very well. Dale says the ARC 250 does work in Windows 10, but ARC 780 did not. So,
yeah, I mean, it's worth a try.
Yeah, like I said, try the compatibility mode.
Yeah, I mean, I'm running on Windows 10 a bootleg version of Photoshop, and it still works. So
there you go. So we already talked about that. Future show idea. What were the first Type 1, Type 2, EDEX, and P25 systems? Yeah, if you know who they are, Dale, let us know, and we'll do a show about it.
Yeah, Dale, you can co-host with us.
There you go. That'll work. We'll do another guest shot.
Yeah,
another threesome.
Yeah, well, we need one for November.
Yeah, there you go, Dale.
Dale,
there you go,
Dale.
Hey, Dale.
Dale.
All right.
He's not on the road. That'll be interesting.
Yeah. All right, so Anthony wants to know how he can use his noise-canceling headphones without an auxiliary cord on his 436. So I'm assuming that he has some sort of Bluetooth headphones. You can use a Bluetooth adapter plugged into your scanner.
Yeah, little
little dongles.
Yeah, and you can use that and go from there. I mean, we were looking at Scannermaster, we were looking at selling those, but I don't know what ended up happening with that. That was kind of like one of Rich's. He got a little hyped up on that, and then it kind of died down.
Yeah. Those are kind of cool, but the problem is they have to have a little battery in them, and that battery is only going to last a couple hours, and then it's going to have to be recharged. And now you've got to sell a charger or a USB cable with it, and it gets kind of, and for $20 you can go in and get a decent pair of wired earphones. So as well. Let's see here. Tom says he plans on dying young but very old in life. So that's the way to do it. Die as an old man, but never grow up and never become old. Foxtrot 1 is the first lady. I didn't know that. Okay. Sarah's checking in from Pembroke, Mass.
Yeah, I know where that is. That's in Plymouth County.
The question asks, what's the best software to use for the BC125AT?
The ARC 125.
Bingo.
I had to get in there because you're on a.
I know. All right, then you take the next one.
Oh, it'd probably be the most difficult one.
Yeah, that's why I gave it to you.
Well, go ahead. Tell me which the next one is.
The next one up, Dale's.
What is this now? Of course I get this.
I'll tell you what. Let me take this one, and I'll let you take the next one because I know what he's talking about.
So this is an antenna splitter. Oh, this is on the two-way radio side of things.
Yeah. The question came up earlier how he can use his AM broadcast antenna on his scanner. Styco is a antenna company who makes hideaway antennas for police cars and such as one of their product lines, and they do make an antenna splitter. And that you can use on your broadcast antenna, or it's actually you replace the antenna with their antenna. It looks like a broadcast antenna, but it will work on your AM FM radio, but it's got that older Motorola style connector. And then for the two-way radios, it goes to another.
Yeah, I wonder if do the newer radios in the vehicles have that Motorola connection in there still? I don't think so.
No,
I mean, I haven't taken with my old Chevy S10 Blazer, I did look to see what was back there. But I won't dare take apart, these newer vehicles.
No, the old days you used to be able to change the radios out. And that used to be a big thing. You go to Radio Shack, you buy or electronic store, you buy a Kenwood stereo.
Crutchfield, the catalog.
What was it?
Crutchfield.
No,
so
they didn't have that in Chicago.
No, it was a national company. They specialized in car radios, and they had all types of different things. I'm not too sure if they're even still in business.
Yeah. Well, it used to be in the day Kenwood stereos were the bomb, and that was the one to get. But you could go to any Radio Shack store or Fredder's or any of those electronic stores back in the day and buy new car stereos. Take out your old stereo and put the new one in. And they had a Motorola connector on the back, and it was like a banana plug style connector, and that was the standard mobile car antenna. But these days, you can't take the dashboards apart and take the stereos out. It's all part of the vehicle. It's all computer controlled these days. Let's see here. Did you find it yet?
No, I don't see it. I'm not going to waste my time.
All right.
Where are we?
Todd at 24 after.
Oh, he's Wyoming Link.
Yeah.
And he's got his 796D. Finally checking, listening to that. I wonder how he's doing with that, because that was kind of like an issue he was worried about. Is that a simulcast, the Wyoming Link?
I think in the Laramie and Casper areas it is, but in the rest of the state they're all single site.
Okay, so he shouldn't have a problem there with the 796D.
No. Well, they do use VHF on that system, if I recall correctly.
Oh yeah, so it's a mix.
Yeah.
Was he doing channel plans at that point?
Yeah, you're probably gonna end up having to do custom channel plans and such. But it is a VHF and 800 system, so it's going to be you can have some fun programming it, but you shouldn't have too much of a problem with it. It should work pretty well on the non-simulcast sites.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, at some point, Todd, if you're able to take a look at possibly a 996 P2, if you're in an area where there's no simulcast, that'll be then you won't have to fool with the channel plans. Then if you really can go all out, then the SDS 200 would be the cream of the crop.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I would say if you're not dealing with simulcast, 996 P2 is definitely a solid unit. I would definitely recommend
that. Dale and Donnie both mentioned that Crutchfield still does exist, and they're based in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Okay. Yeah, because I used to get those catalogs. I never upgraded my radio, but I always like to look at the new toys and all that. Yeah. I mean, I had a friend of mine that he would he had a pickup truck that he lowered and did all sorts of crazy things. I remember my wife, when she was first down in Massachusetts, she grew up in Maine, and in Maine, you basically jack up your trucks. You don't drop your trucks to the ground, and you don't put low profile tires on them. So we were going into one of the stores, and she said, "What the heck's going on with those tires? They look like they're flat." I said, "Oh, those are low profile tires." They had, and I've had a couple of people that I was friends with that had the low profile tires, and they were in Massachusetts, and the roads were crap. And guess what happens? You don't have very much room in between the rim and the tire. It's very thin, so you end up cracking the rim. So it becomes a very, very expensive thing.
Yeah, but they look good in the hood.
Well, the thing that kind of cracks me up is when I see these cars, that don't look like they're worth a damn, but the rims are probably, more in between the rims and the tires are worth more than the whole entire car.
Oh yeah. Well, I had my Mustangs had the TRX tires, and they were not the real super low profile like you see on some of these cars, but they were much low profile than the regular cars. But they were speed rated too, and they were speed rated up to like 150, which is pretty good because I had that car up to about 130 on the track a couple times.
Yeah, so. And that's it has a little bit of a sidewall to it, so it's not totally. And the thing, it's a pain in the ass from what I understand. Oops, I just said ass over the thing. I just said it again. Anyway, we're in this. What time is it? It's after 10 anyway. So changing those tires off the rim is extremely difficult because there's not a lot of, with that small sidewall, there's not a lot of flex there. When you take out the air, there's still not a lot of flex. And the other thing too is anytime that you puncture a tire on the sidewall, it's basically no good. You can patch or put a plug in with the threaded section, but anything on the sidewall, forget it.
I had a Honda that had run flats, and it had a fiberglass insert in the inside it. The problem is those tires were very hard to get, and they cost $600 a piece. And you had to have a special tool to change them because the height of the rim was higher on the inside than it was on the outside.
Wow.
So it was really goofy, but $600 a piece to replace.
Tires are crazy. In between the tires and then the smart, it's escaping me now. Where you put the air in. I can't think of the technical
valve.
Yeah, the air valves, because the air valve, each one of those have a computer base to it, which sends a signal to your computer system on your vehicle. I had
they were 437 megahertz, by the way, on my Honda.
I know we're probably getting sidetracked, but I'll tell you another quick story. So I'm on my Toyota Tundra. I have the what, are you able to hear it?
No, I don't know what the ones on this car, but my last car, they were at 437.0.
So I've had a Toyota Tundra. I've had several Toyota Tundras, but usually the deal is 25,000 miles. You have free service. So I brought my truck in to get its service every 5,000 miles, whatever they do. And this wasn't the current truck that I have; it was one of the previous ones. So they rotate the tires and they inflate the tires and all that business. So in the garage, they basically they throw off your covers, and then they just throw on any old ones. So they put on metal ones instead of the plastic ones that came with my car.
Yeah.
And you guess what happened? Metal on metal, it got stuck on there.
Sure.
So I went into the dealership. It was one of my last services. It was a 20,000 mile service. This is one of the big dealers in Massachusetts. He broke the friggin' valve stem. And, so they had me come in there. I was really ticked off. I think my dad and my daughter were there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the most pissed off they've ever seen me. I was dropping the F-bomb and everything, and they wanted me to repair it. And I said, I haven't done anything with these valve stems. I've came in here. You do the maintenance for the last several things. There's no reason for me to put metal covers on there. So they broke it. And then they said, do you want us to try to get the other ones off? I said, no, don't even touch it. Leave it alone. So what ended up happening is I made so much of a stink that they replaced the valve stem. They were going to make me replace it. And, they basically put it on. So what ended up happening is I got, some spray product, and one by one, I got them off without breaking the valve stem. I kept working at it. It was just, and I never went back for my my final thing, which they just rotate your tires. But that was, they were trying to blame me on that. I could care less about putting metal valve stem covers on.
We were talking earlier about that. It was called the Tire Pressure Monitoring System, TPMS. If you scan between like 430 and 440 megahertz, you might find them. I found one at 436.5 and the other one at 437.0. So check them. And if it's not your car, it might be your neighbor's car.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's so expensive. You think about the whole thing, the tires, those valves. Oh, yeah. It's so expensive.
Todd says his dad still has his Bearcat 140, and there was a mod that you can do to bring it up to 16 channels from the original 10. So Nathan wants us to do a video on the M75 preamp showing how it makes a difference. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to make a video on that. The thing is with preamps, if you're in an urban area, you probably don't want one. If you're in a rural area, they might work out well for you. And the best place to put a preamp is at the antenna, not at the radio. So if you want to use a preamp, it's going to be much more effective if you put it up at the antenna and not down at the radio.
Yeah, the other with that preamp, it's very expensive. So I mean, I would recommend it on something maybe like a Uniden radio, maybe not a Uniden SDS 100 or 200, because you're going to get overload. Same thing if you're running with a GRE or a Whistler. They tend to be a little bit more sensitive, so you probably want to stay away from it. Preamps, especially a preamp of that caliber on your SDS 100, 200, probably stay away from it. It's just, on that radio, it's going to overload a lot. And what you're going to typically get just on the railroad frequencies, just to give you an example, you're going to get a lot of imaging of nowhere with the radio. You're pulling that in like crazy.
Yeah. All righty. So Mr. BioCal says it's his first show. His first scanner was a Pro 34. They had to share with his brother. I never had a brother, so I never had to share my toys, which is always a good thing. So either be an only child or the only boy, and you won't have to share with your you never have to share anything with my sisters. So.
Well, it doesn't mean that there's not women in this hobby. That's for sure. That's true.
Did any
of your sisters, have any interest in the? Not at all.
No interest at all in any of my toys, which was fine by me. The only thing I ever had to worry about is my sister would take my bike every once in a while, but that was it.
How many sisters? Two. Three.
Yeah. And in fact, I just talked to my one sister knows nothing about computers, so she calls about twice a week that my computer doesn't do this and the computer doesn't do that. Yeah, okay. Take a class, girl. Take a class. He also had an HX200 and a 210XL, which is the old Regency and Bearcat scanners. M16 Club still has his Bearcat 350A, which was an oldie but a goodie. Todd still has a 350A, but he's got to get it fixed or replaced. Randy says the old emergency TV show used the Regency scanner to contact the LA County Animal Control from Rampart Hospital. So yeah, that was a good thing. I mean, that was a great show, and it was pretty accurate a lot of times, but they would get details like that wrong occasionally. And also, they'd roll a card into the treatment room with no cables attached, no wires attached. Yeah, you see that a lot of TV shows are like that. They, it's like watching, was that Die Hard, where they had the magic radios that talked to whoever you wanted to talk to at that particular time, but then the bad guy could never hear you until you wanted to talk to him, and then you just talk to him. Yeah,
everybody's on the same frequency.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see, we answered a couple of these questions already. The biggest problem with keypads and membrane keypads is the printing wears off after years of use. Yep. That is a problem. And like I say, I was able to get some replacement keypads for my Pro 43, which was notoriously bad for that. Let's see here. So Chris asks, how do you override the 436 to keep it on when it's charged or plugged into the computer when its batteries don't last all day? So on the Pro 436 and most Uniden scanners, except for the STS 100, when you plug the scanner into a power source, and when the radio is on, it will run off the power source, not the batteries. It will not charge the batteries while the radio is on. If you turn the radio off, it will charge the batteries. So you can take a 436 and take the batteries out of the radio and then plug it into a charger, and it will work. And it will run the radio. Obviously, you're not going to charge the batteries that way. I don't even use rechargeable batteries. I use Duracells or Energizers, whatever happens to be on sale at Sam's Club or Costco at the time. I just find it too difficult to maintain and manage rechargeable batteries. Dale says his 796D does work on the WildLink system, and it works on his local simulcast 800 system. What the 796 will not work on are 700 megahertz systems. So if you got a 700 megahertz system or a phase 2 system, you're going to have to replace your 796 with a new scanner. There was an issue with the 796. He had to check the box for 7.5 kilohertz support before he uploaded the code plug. So it's an older radio that was built before 7.5 kilohertz spacing was a thing on VHF. So apparently there is a workaround to make that stuff work.
Cool.
And it looks like we are at the end of the comments. We're only 3 hours in this week.
Yeah, a long 3 hours, that's for sure. Let's wrap it up with the closing slides here. So next week's show will be Wednesday, October the 28th, 2020. Ask the Scanner Guys, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, live right here on YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on that particular channel. And let's see here. So Train Aficionado Live, which is the first Monday of every month. This next broadcast will be Monday, November the 2nd, hosted by myself and Rich Carlson. Make sure you go over to the Train Aficionado page and subscribe to that channel if you're a rail fan, and you can join us for our talk about trains in the movies. And make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to their social media, Train Aficionado, at Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And then make sure you check out the blog at trainaficionado.com. Follow, like, and subscribe to Scanner Master on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Scanner Master Co. And as always, make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to the Facebook page, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram channels of the scanner guys as well. And that'll wrap up things for us this evening. So we hope that you all enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week talking, basically answering your questions and covering all those unique and interesting things.
And we'll try to keep it more to scanners and less of the fluff.
Well, there's some interesting things. I mean, it's tied to the
a little fluff is good here and there. So
yes. All right. So I'm Jonathan Higgins,
and I'm Rich Carlson.
So if you made it this far in the broadcast, congratulations. We'll catch you again next week. Have a good night, guys.